Zoom all minute or so. Yeah, I don't. Oh, here we go. Just gotta wait for the YouTube. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the meeting of the Mayor and Council of Princeton, New Jersey. It is September 27th, 2022. And just a couple things real quick, since this is our second hybrid meeting. Going to remind all of us up here on the dais and the staff that you need to really just about eat the microphone in order for people to actually hear you talk. So, and especially people with soft voices, make sure you really get that microphone close to you. The other thing, just for everyone watching and the people in the room, we have iPads in front of us that have the agenda on them. So when you see us looking down a lot, we're not ignoring anyone that's on Zoom or here, but we're looking at either the agenda package, and then we have another large screen that lets us see ourselves. And just for the council members, when it's time for everybody to raise a hand to speak, I'm going to try to look at the large monitor. It give me a better idea of who had their hand up when. I'll try to get everybody in the order they put their hand up, but if I don't, everybody will get a chance to speak, but I'll get better at that as meetings go on. The only other thing I'll mention, because I noticed after the meeting, our last meeting, some number of people tried to text me during the meeting. Don't text me during the meeting. I do not text during meetings, so it'll be a waste of your time, and I won't answer you because I'm not looking for those. So it's just too distracting. Having said all that, could we please have our meeting statement?
Yes. Notice of this meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act and state regulations governing public meetings, including the time, date, and location of the meeting, and clear and concise instructions to the public for accessing the meeting and making comments. In addition, the agenda and all related materials were posted electronically and made available to the public on Princeton's meeting portal in advance of the meeting.
Thank you. Could we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Ms. Perrone-Lambros?
Here.
Ms. Niedergang?
Here.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Fraga?
Here.
Ms. Sachs?
Here.
Mr. Newland?
Here.
Mayor Frida?
Here. All right, if we could all rise and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. First up on the agenda, we have 6 sets of minutes to approve and or discuss. Or Eve?
I would like to move the minutes with a minor editorial change that I already conveyed to the clerk.
Okay.
And it has been changed.
Thank you.
Okay. And you're moving all 6, Eve?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Leticia? Okay, Leticia second. Any other questions or comments on the minutes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are passed. All right. Public comments for items not on the agenda. We had one person sign the list. Lisa Wu? Lisa? Yeah. And just, I think you know the routine, but just say your name and address, and then the
Yes.
3-minute counter will start.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lisa Wu. Thank you. I would like to promote the nutrition program. This is passed by Congress 1965. This is not just for poor, for everybody. Monday through Friday, at the old abandoned firehouse on the 13th of Chestnut Street, and they provide balanced meal. And I got this information brochure from county nutrition program. I like to pass to the council, and I like to promote and to remind the resident in Princeton, which is over 60, they can get this meal at the site Monday through Friday. And I am being anticipated for at least 3 years. And I thought that was also opportunity or a place that people can talk, have a conversation, and receive a nutrition meal. I will leave it this with Dawn, and I hope that council can support this program. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Good
you.
night.
And just so you know, the clerk has provided everyone up here with a copy of the handout, so we can all see it, so we appreciate
you.
that.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Wu.
Okay. Adam, do we have anyone on the Zoom call that has a hand up to do public comments for items not on the agenda? Okay, if there's no one else, no one else in the room or no one else on Zoom, we'll close the public comments for items not on the agenda. And next up are announcements and reports. So we usually do the council members first, and then we do staff. Any council members that have announcements or reports they want to share at this point? Eve?
Thanks, Mayor. I have a couple of brief things. And on the first one, maybe our Assistant Municipal Engineer can chime in. Just a heads up that there's a new traffic pattern around the shopping center. There's been a lot of chat on some of our social media about that, and we're trying to make sure that people are safe with the changes that are happening there. So just drive slowly and carefully. And Mr. Purcell, do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Ms. Niedergang. I will comment on that the traffic pattern is such that when you are either entering or exiting the shopping center, the left lane is a left turn only lane. It used to be straight through and left turn, so motorists should pay particular attention to that change. The right lane is for straight through traffic and right turns.
Thank you so much for those details. And then just a brief announcement that tomorrow night the Princeton Environmental Commission will be having a discussion about the master plan with Acting Planning Director Justin Lesko, who's here with us tonight, and the Planning Board Chair Louise Wilson. So if you're interested, please join us. 7:30 on Zoom. Thanks.
Thanks, Eve. Other council members? Okay. Seeing none. Bernie, is there anything from staff at this point?
Mayor, just there's been some questions regarding, I guess, recent billings for tax and sewer, and I can address what I know about that. Our CFO is not available, but we switched vendors for our payment of tax and sewer. We had the same vendor for about 20 years. With that vendor, there was no ACH fees, and credit cards fees were 2.65%. That vendor, there was a change in ownership. We were not getting apparently the level of service that we needed from them. We changed vendors. We now use Edmunds, which is probably one of the most used in the industry. There's not a lot to choose from as far as vendors, but they charge $1.95 for ACH fees and $2.95 for credit cards. So there was an increase with that. I believe the billing has changed as well. While we send out the same bill, you have to pay your sewer and your taxes separately. That's based on the requirements of Edmunds, so it's nothing we're doing. It's the vendor is requiring that of us. So that's, if that answers some questions. I know Councilwoman Niedergang had asked me some questions, so I'm bringing it to you all.
No, thank you. And I would just add that the that our CFO and her office, her staff are looking at the wording on the website when you go into it. It's a little confusing. It's not, I guess it's not as easy as using an Apple product where you're supposed to just be intuitive and go from one step to another. So they're trying to improve the wording on there to make it easier for people to know what to highlight or what dot to fill in or whatever. So hopefully people have patience with us as we try to improve that process. Thanks, Bernie. Okay, why don't we go to, we have two.
I have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just have one announcement, which is that on September 30th, there is the E-Commuter Fest at the Westminster parking lot. If you've never had an opportunity to ride an e-bike, Sauerland Cycles will be bringing bikes. At Pedigo Princeton will be bringing e-bikes. There will be other bikes to test ride. The Princeton High School Bike Club is offering free bike tune-ups and repair clinics. And if you want to volunteer, contact Sustainable Princeton. That's September 30th, 4 to 7 p.m., celebrating the carbon-free commute.
Thank you.
And there will be bike valet parking if you want to ride your bike to the event.
How can you pass that up? Okay, any other council announcements or reports? All right, if not, the police department has both the June and July report to share with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's nice to see everybody back here in person. Again, just want to apologize for the glitch of everybody getting the July report late. If you haven't had time to digest that, we're always open to questions at a later date. Just to touch on some few things that might not be in there. Probably one of the biggest is our current recruitment that's underway. We started our recruitment process for police officers with 180 applicants through panel interviews in our process. We are now down to 31. So the process is continuing with interviews over the next 2 weeks to see who will advance to the next phase, which will be the background phase. That being said, we're also re-looking at a recruitment process to see where we can improve for the next time and transition into maybe tying in some more advertisement or something to that nature with it. Also, with the Jewish holidays, I just want to let everybody know you will see an increased response or a presence of police around our religious organizations. We typically do that for different type of holidays, but just wanted to point that out in case you do see extra police presence around maybe the Jewish Center on Nassau Street. That's just there as a precautionary measure to help ensure safety and ease any concerns that someone might have. One other thing that's going on that hasn't happened since consolidation is Captain Bucari will be organizing a department meeting. We'll discuss positive changes, and we're looking to schedule that sometime in the near future. So those are just a few highlights. If there's any questions about the reports, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I regret that I didn't really have a chance to go through them in detail, again, because of the Jewish holidays. But I think I remember that we talked a little bit the last time we received a couple of police reports about getting some data, comparative data back to 2019, because comparing 2022 to 2021 or 2020 is not all that informative because those years were so atypical. Did that get into this report? And if not, is that something you can provide in future reports?
It is not in that report, but as of today, we've already met with our records staff, and that's going to be a change that we will see coming forward from this point.
Okay, great.
Any other questions for Lieutenant? Okay, let me just make also one comment for anybody at the table here. You don't, I'm not picking on you. You don't need to turn around to talk to us because it's more important to talk into the microphone, because especially for the people on Zoom, they will not be able to hear anything we're saying if we're not speaking clearly into the microphone. And for people like me, hard of hearing, if you don't speak into the microphone and it doesn't hit the speakers, that's also a challenge. So I think I've covered everybody on that one. All right, nothing else on the police? Just want to make sure before we move on. Okay. All right, so we have a presentation on the 2022 Princeton Deer Management Program. And who's taking that away? Ryan's going to do that? Okay.
Yeah, he's on
Adam,
Zoom.
can you bring Ryan in from the Zoom world?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name's Ryan Rotes. I'm Senior Wildlife Biologist for White Buffalo Incorporated. And I'm in the unique position to have been involved in Princeton's deer management program since its inception. So I believe I have a unique view of the program. If the council has questions for me directed about the historical aspects of the program, I'd be happy to answer those. ACO Ferry had asked me to do a quick presentation on what non-lethal deer management would look like in Princeton. And I have the unique perspective of being involved in the 2003 to 2006 deer management program that looked at the use of immunocontraceptives, both Gonacon, which is the only registered immunocontraceptive agent for curbing white-tailed deer reproduction, and SPAVAC trials. So from there to where we are today, if we could bring up my first slide, all I see is myself. So I'm not sure if that's pulled up, and if it is, we can move from that first slide to the second slide. And on that, when we're looking at contraceptive or non-lethal management in suburbia, when we're looking at an open population similar to what we would experience in Princeton, we're really looking at managing from the female side. Due to breeding characteristics, it's really not feasible to attack the problem on the male side, which would be biologically a lot easier. The surgery would be a lot easier. So we're really looking at the female side. And from the female side, we have two basic options. One, you're using some type of immunocontraceptive, and two, you're looking at surgical sterilization. Since about 2009, we've opted to go the surgical sterilization route, and that's due to the fact that if you're using an immunocontraceptive agent, it requires an initial vaccine and a boost vaccine to make that very effective. It's essentially similar to the COVID shot, where if you get the first dose, it doesn't protect you 100%. And so that's what we saw in our initial contraceptive trials in Princeton, that the initial dose gave about 50% efficacy, and then you really didn't get up to where you'd want to be, which is about 90% efficacy, until you got the second boost. And the amount of effort that it requires to have that level of capture really creates difficulty in being able to ensure that you can attain that. So even though deer in these environments are fairly naive to our approaches, they learn very quickly. And so that second capture attempt creates a lot of additional effort. So like I said, going back to 2009, we've opted to go the surgical sterilization route. The amount of effort is a little more upfront, and the procedure is a little more invasive. But once you handle that animal, it's protected for life. Whereas with a immunocontraceptive vaccine, you get roughly 50% efficacy with one dose. It boosts you up to about 90% efficacy with a second dose. And typically that lasted 3 to 5 years. So, under normal circumstances, you may be handling that animal 3 times. So for an area like Princeton, we would be looking at a surgical sterilization effort, and that would occur through an immobilization agent. And there's really 2 ways to capture that animal to administer the immobilization agent. One, you would be using a dart projector and remotely immobilizing them off of the right-of-way of the roads. Or 2, you'd be using a drop net to capture them and using a immobilization agent under the drop net. During the initial study in Princeton, about 30% of the animals were captured using the drop net methodology, and then the other 70% were remotely immobilized, either on a private property or off the road, right away of the road. So those are kind of the methodologies that we would be using. If we could forward on to the last slide, and I don't know that that's available, but it kind of outlines the proposed areas where we would implement some sort of fertility control to complement the lethal efforts that are going on. And those were just based on ACO Ferries data from deer vehicle collisions and homeowner complaints in areas that the legal management has either been non-existent or not particularly effective due to access issues. So looking at it from that aspect, these would be complementary efforts to what is currently occurring in Princeton.
Ryan, it's Trishka. I'm just going to cut in on a couple of things. Unfortunately, we're not seeing your slides, but the map that Ryan was referring to that shows some of the areas that might be proposed for sterilization either was in the packets, but I also did email it out at least to all the council members and to the clerk this afternoon. I hope it may have, I don't know if, I got it to Dolores so late. I don't know if it made it with the online materials, but I did
We
send
have
it
it here.
out. Yeah, I did send it out. So that's the
It
map he's
did.
referring to. And then just in terms of the methodologies, just as a clarification, you know, in the last 24 hours or so, I've been in pretty routine contact with Tony DiNicola at White Buffalo, and the intent here would be to dart the does from the right-of-way using a dart gun and to tranquilize them that way. That would be the capture technique that would be used, according to Tony, and I've got that in writing.
And I may be able to share my screen here, if I can pull up this in the background, and we'll see if this works. I didn't know if I would be able to do that, and we'll see what we can do here. And that doesn't give me the option, so I apologize for that. But anyways, the proposed areas for the surgical sterilization should be in the packet that was presented to council. So, and once again, those were just areas that were outlined, and we'll have better refinement of data once Stewart Green completes their infrared assessment using drones.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Are we going to council questions next, or are we going, or Jimmy and Cindy? Okay. Thank you. Stand by, Ryan. We're doing some computer hookups here, laptops.
Numbers.
We're almost there. All right, thank you, everyone,
Come
for your
back in 6
patience.
months, we'll have figured everything out.
So Jimmy, how hard or how bad will it be if you just start telling us what you want to tell us without the,
We could probably go to Cindy first, because I literally have graphs and maps to show.
okay, why don't we do that then so we don't,
Yeah, I can start off without graphs or images. So I'm just giving a very brief and generic. Can
got
you
it?
hear me all right now?
Yeah.
That's gross. So I'm just going to give a very brief overview of why deer management's appropriate and important for managing our forests and open space. Council has supported this many, many times in the past, so I'm not going to delve deep into any data, but if you have follow-up questions or something like that, I have a stack of references that are informing a lot of the things I'll tell you right now. But essentially, there's just two major ways that deer affect our forests and open space. The first being reduction in regeneration and recruitment of plant species. So regeneration means whether or not plants are able to go from seed to seedling or sapling, and recruitment meaning can those plants go from seedling and sapling to a sub-canopy tree or eventually a canopy tree in our forests. What we would expect to see in a lot of healthy forest ecosystems is multiple layers and strata where you have a really healthy herbaceous layer. You have a woody layer that's full of saplings, shrubs, that type of thing. You have a sub-canopy layer full of trees that are ready to take over when your canopy trees die, and then you have your canopy layer. An overabundant deer population can basically eat everything in your understory and degrade the forest that you no longer have those important layers that are essential for different habitat types for all of our insects and animals. Once we get a picture up here, I do have an image of a deer exclosure fence that can show you what excluding deer from a forest can do. On one side, where deer are able to eat and thrive, there's almost nothing in the understory, and then within a deer exclosure fence, you often see a robust, healthy, woody understory. So ultimately, this is really important to ensure that our forests have the healthy layers and strata that we need for our ecosystem health. The second thing that deer do that has a large impact on our ecosystems is that they actually preferentially browse. So not only do they eat a lot, but they prefer to eat native species. A lot of our nonprofits invest a lot of time in battling non-native invasive species. I know Friends of Harrington Woods are always recruiting people to do that. Friends of Princeton Open Space are always doing that, and we've invested some municipal funds to do that as well. When we look at a forest and a deer's walking through a forest, they're more likely to eat the seedling of a white oak tree than the twig of a non-native Japanese barberry. So you're giving a competitive advantage to those non-native species if you're not properly managing the deer population. And there's some areas in New Jersey that we can point to where you have an understory that's essentially overtaken completely by non-native species, which is contributed to by a lot of different factors, and deer being a very big one of those. And my next slide is a table, actually. So when we think about how many deer we should have, there's estimates that suggest that our forests evolved over time with about 5 to 10 deer per square mile. But generally, there's scientific consensus that somewhere around less than 26 deer per square mile is what's most appropriate for sustainable forest regeneration. Our Princeton Climate Action Plan goal is 20 to 30, so that is appropriate for what's the scientific consensus. Our last municipal study, which was done by White Buffalo through deer point counts, distance sampling, basically taking samples from the roadway, came up with about 34 deer per square mile, so we're just slightly over what our goal is to reach by 2025. Interestingly, though, Princeton University also did a study in 2021 using Steward Green with the infrared drone technology. And on Princeton University properties within the municipality, not including West Windsor, they estimate there's about 70 deer per square mile. So that's way higher than what we would want to have in our open space. So ultimately, it'll be interesting to see. I know that council voted on this last meeting to have Stewart Green go ahead and do infrared drone studies on how many deer we have. But we're sitting somewhere above where we'd like to be for sustainable forest regeneration. And if you have any questions, let me know. That's great.
Just in time.
So that,
So I'll just point out this picture on the right on the screen right now is an understory that's completely overtaken by Japanese barberry, which is a non-native that a deer does not prefer to eat. On the left-hand side is the photo of the deer exclosure fencing. The right hand of the left-hand photo shows where deer can exist and eat everything. On the left-hand side is where deer cannot go and are excluded from. And you can kind of see, I've used this photo so many years in presentations that I can't remember how old this deer exclosure fence was, but just based on the wood and the regeneration, I would say that's probably just a year difference of excluding deer from that understory. So you can see very quick rebounds when you get deer to a more sustainable number.
And
So-
I just want to,
go ahead.
I just want to jump in real quick to illuminate a point you made when you look at the picture on my right that's in front of me with the Japanese barberry. Like Cindy pointed out that the deer don't like them, but neither do any of our other native species. So they're not. It's not that the deer don't like them and everything else is very happy. You know, it really is a bad plant for our environment because none of our native species grew up using them as part of their, life, their lifestyle. That is really not the right word, lifestyle. Can
Yeah,
you
that's
please give me more scientific language?
So the native insects have not co-evolved with Japanese barberry. So when I look at that picture on the right, every single green leaf you see in the understory is really not providing food for anything. And if you're not seeing insects eating those leaves, that means that there's no caterpillars on the leaves. That means there's no caterpillars for the birds to come down, eat that. The bird number decreases. Birds are no longer dispersing as many seeds, and we start decreasing in biodiversity. So it's kind of like the most basic trophic level that we should be managing to ensure we have a healthy ecosystem. It looks very green and lush, but it's not providing much food at all. It is providing cover, but not food.
David?
Yeah, I apologize if you did already say this, but the difference between the number of deer per square mile from our study versus the universities, is that the difference in the technique that's used, the infrared versus the drone survey?
I think it can be a combination of intensive deer management on municipal properties where they do the sampling and also of the sampling technique. I think it's a combination of both.
The university was looking at different parts of town, looking just at their own campus, I guess.
Exactly, yep.
Okay. Jim, are you going to go through your?
Absolutely. Real quick, I wanted to show if Ryan's still with us, I have the map that was in question earlier. These are the areas where I've either observed or have gotten a high amount of complaints that traditionally we never had access to. So these are the areas we're really going to be taking a look at for the non-lethal portion, should that go forward. I wanted to show that real quick. All right, so I'm going to, good evening, everyone. My goal for this presentation is to give you just the data and insight on deer-related motor vehicle crashes and the trends that we see and how far we've come in reducing these unfortunate encounters. Since taking over as ACO in 2018, I made it a priority to accurately record deer-related crashes and pinpoint their locations. In September of last year, New Jersey saw a widespread outbreak of EHD, epizoonotic hemorrhagic disease, in the white-tailed deer population. Within a 5-week span here in Princeton, we had 40-plus deer that were picked up in various areas of town, most likely residential properties near waterways. After this outbreak, I decided to also track dead deer on private property or non-vehicle related deaths to get a better idea of deer mortality in Princeton. Utilizing the C-Click fix, I was able to accurately track these stats, and also residents can report dead deer right away and expedite their removal. All right. So the two maps I'm showing you right now, the map on the left shows all the deer that have been picked up on the roadway since January 1st of this year. High crash areas include Stockton, Edgerstone area, State and Jefferson, State and Cherry Valley. Nothing really out of the ordinary. It's a pretty typical, given the daily traffic on 206. The map on the right shows the dead deer picked up on private property or non-roadway incidents. These animals have no obvious signs of blunt force trauma and were found in residential areas away from roadways where a car collision was very unlikely. Some of these animals were also found deceased or mortally wounded from impalement or entrapment in fences. This graph here shows deer-related car crashes by the Princeton Police Department dating back to 1972. As you can see, we're trending in the right direction. It's important to note that the wide gap of dead deer on the roadway found by animal control and police reported collisions nowadays are they're very much off. I'll show you that in the next slide. We believe it's, talking with the police department, that it's due to insurance companies no longer requiring a police report to file a claim for animal strikes. I do not have information on the 1984 drop-off. I have no information on that. All right, so this is all the data that I collect and that we really look at when we come up with our plans. It's a more detailed report post-2001 after our deer management began. The blue line represents the bow hunter harvest. The orange is deer harvested by white buffalo. The gray shows dead deer on roadway, in my opinion, the most important statistic. And yellow is the PD reported crashes. I'm able to explain the 39 deer in 2015. This was most likely due to a change in the ACO position, and there was a gap in between that. So that data was not accurately recorded at that time. In 2011, white buffalo portion of the program was not utilized. In 2013 and 14, the statistics reflect that the deer collisions started to trend in the wrong direction. Since 2018, MVCs have steadily decreased each year, and we're currently projected to about 60 deer-related fatalities on the roadways. As of today, we stand at 38. However, the annual rut is right around the corner. Male deer activity skyrockets during the mating season, and more motorists are driving on dark roadways. Those are the numbers. That's what I deal with every day, and this is what I see out in the roadways. Ryan, are you still there?
I am.
We have the slides up now. Sorry about that. Did you want to go back to any of your slides and touch on anything?
Yeah, we can certainly go back over maybe the picture of both immunocontraceptive and ovarectomies, and when we look at how that occurs, basically we set up a temporary surgery suite. We've been doing the surgical sterilization since 2009, I believe, so it wasn't too long after we finalized the research in Princeton that we moved to the surgical sterilizations, and that's really reflective of the amount of effort it takes to capture those animals a second or third time. So we found that that's been much more efficient, and I can't even tell you how many research projects that we've done. It's probably in the neighborhood of 10. We started doing the surgical sterilizations in Town and Country, Missouri in 2009, and since then we've done them in Fairfax, Virginia, Long Island, New York, Ann Arbor, Michigan, the Villages in San Jose, California, Cayuga, New York, and I believe last year we started another research project in South Euclid, Ohio. So this isn't experimental procedure by any stretch of the imagination. It's a highly refined process, similar to spaying a dog or cat. We have a veterinary on staff, who's performed probably 1,000 of these surgeries at this point. So, you know, each procedure from the time that you anesthetize the deer in the field to getting them into the surgery suite and releasing them is generally around an hour and 15 minutes. The surgery itself takes usually on average probably 10 to 15 minutes. So it's the surgery itself is not very long. We don't see any additive mortality due to the surgery. It falls right within the normal capture mortality that you would expect, which is generally somewhere around 5 to 10%. And that's just anytime you're handling wildlife, you can expect some mortality from that capture. So generally, that's what we see. Each animal will be ear tagged because of the drugs that we use for the capture have a withdrawal period for consumption. So each individual female that's captured will get ear tags. Yep, just like her. Some may get fitted with radio collars. We didn't put that in the proposal. And generally, you know, the movement studies have been done hundreds of times in suburbia. So we know generally that their home range is going to be fairly small. And when we're using radio collars at this point, generally it's to help us as wildlife biologists find that animal in the field to figure out who parts of the matriarchal group are in case we need to capture some additional individuals in that group. So I don't suspect we'll be using many radio collars in Princeton if that part of the program's approved and we get the regulatory change needed to be able to implement. I think that's really the biggest hurdle. And then I think that pretty much covers it, other than like I said, the data from the survey that Stuart Green's going to conduct may help refine the areas where the surgical sterilizations can be beneficial. And I think that it's important to note that this won't be the first infrared count that they've done in Princeton. They did aerial infrared. Larry Davis, Davis Aviation, did it back in the winter of 2004, 2005. So, you know, when we look at the survey methodologies that have taken place in Princeton, we've done helicopter snow counts, we've done, you know, aerial infrared using fixed wing and aircraft, distance sampling, and now we'll be using, or you guys will be using a drone survey using aerial infrared. So pretty much covered almost all the options other than camera surveys.
Okay. David, and then Eve, and then Michelle.
I wonder if somebody can talk a little bit about the way this program evolves over time. In other words, you know, once you've sterilized a certain number of does, does that mean that you can ease up? I mean, is it something that could be a money saver for the municipality compared to the deer hunt, which has to be ongoing every year?
I guess I'm probably have the most knowledge of this, and that could be a possibility if you were implementing surgical sterilization across the whole community. The difficulty with that is the deer in the municipality have been hunted for so long that they're wary of hunting activities, which would really preclude you from capturing a high enough percentage to have a population level impact. So unfortunately, it's a tool that can be implemented only on naive deer. And, you know, there's, I would say, at least 30% of the community is actively hunted outside the programs that are implemented by Princeton itself, right? So you have recreational hunters in a lot of the areas along Cherry Valley Road, Drake's Corner, down along PK as you get down towards the Institute. So those areas, you're going to have hunting, and that's going to preclude any type of more broad-ranged sterilization efforts. Like I said, in order to have a population level impact, you need to be able to capture 90% of the females. That's difficult to achieve in very dense suburban environments where the deer are extremely naive. So to try to implement it on a wider scale where hunting's taking place is just, it's not feasible.
So I guess the follow-up question is, how do you choose the right deer to capture next year and the year after? I mean, are you doing a lot of catch and release where you catch deer who've already been sterilized? And just talk a little bit about the efficiency, ongoing efficiency of the operation.
Yeah, so when we're looking at the areas that we would be capturing, there's no management that's happening at this point, right? There are areas mostly in the old study area, which would be along the Riverside neighborhoods, up towards, I think it's Randall, and then over into what would have been the old borough. So those are places that there hasn't really had any management, and those deer should be fairly naive, right? They haven't been hunted. They're not pressured. They're used to human activity. That allows us to have the ability to capture a high percentage of those animals. So in those areas, what you would expect is you may have a few deer from the periphery that may need to be treated in the future, but the likelihood is that the amount of effort that you're putting into sterilization will taper off as you saturate the number of females that have been treated. And so I would expect that portion of the program would diminish, but you would still be looking at the lethal management in the other areas of the municipality where you're just not going to be able to capture a high enough percentage to make a difference. So as the program progresses, generally what we see on these projects is about 10% natural mortality. So in the areas where you're implementing these surgical sterilizations, you would see that population drop by roughly 10% a year. The difficulty is that once you remove the reproductive stress, they're long-lived animals, right? Some of the deer that would be captured in the upcoming winter will be around for 10 or maybe even 15 years. So, they're going to be in the environment for a while. So it's more of a long process of them tapering off through attrition, basically.
Eve?
Thanks for that explanation, Ryan. I wanted to do a couple of things. I have some comments from some people in the community who couldn't be here. And Mayor, should I wait till give everybody a shot before I go to those?
It's going to take the same amount of time either way. Go ahead.
Okay, so first I just wanted to ask our attorney who's been involved with this program since before day one, to just talk a little bit, illuminate a little bit Ryan's comment about what the obstacle is to putting the non-lethal method into play, which is something we're very committed to doing, but ...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be happy to, because I think I finally have a good understanding of what it is in terms of being able to summarize it. And this is a very technical interpretation of regulation, so bear with me. But basically, under the community-based deer management plan regulations, and when you use White Buffalo, you're doing a community-based deer management plan, as it's called under state law. And those plans are comprehensive. They can consist of any number of techniques, including non-lethal, and that's specifically referenced in the statute and in the regulations. What the statute and the regulations both say is that as part of your application, you have to document landowner consent from all quote-unquote affected landowners. I mean, it's obviously that, would very clearly apply where White Buffalo is setting up tree stands to conduct its culling operations. They need the permission of that property owner where they're going to be directly operating. That makes a great deal of sense. And that's how it was applied until, I believe, 2009. And that's why even the contraception program was possible, because White Buffalo knew where it was setting itself, where it was going to set up. We could get those landowner consent forms in advance and submit them, which is what we were doing. But I think it was right around in 2009, the Division of Fish and Wildlife started applying it more broadly, and as I understand it, basically took the approach that affected landowner is anyone on whose property you might need to set foot. So if you've tranquilized a deer from the roadway, as Ryan was describing, so you've darted the deer to administer the tranquilizer, the deer is not going to politely remain in place until, you know, while the tranquilizer takes effect. It's just been shot in the rear end with a dart. You know, so the deer move, and you don't know in which direction they're going to move, and you don't know across whose properties they're going to move, but you have to track the deer across those properties, and then you have to retrieve them where they fall. And so you can see how if the interpretation of affected landowner applies to every single one of those properties, it is simply impossible to document that landowner consent in advance unless you go to literally every single property in the area where you're going to be doing your non-lethal deer management and get those permissions in advance, which again, you know, it may not be impossible, it is utterly impracticable. So I think it's that kind of nuance in how Division of Fish and Wildlife has been applying the regulation that is what has basically prevented, and it's not just Princeton, by the way. I think and Ryan can speak to this more, but there are other municipalities in this state, at least one that I am aware of through Ryan, that have also tried to do non-lethal, and for the same reason haven't been able to, because you just can't document that landowner consent in advance. So that's really what has stymied the ability to do any kind of non-lethal deer management since 2009. So a couple of things I think that may be a little bit different this year and heading into next year. Again, now, absolutely no guarantee of success, but number one, you know, I think being able to really pinpoint where the issue helps, but vastly more importantly is that we now have the attention and the assistance of people fairly high up at the state, including Senator Lesniak, who we've been meeting with and talking to, who's very committed to non-lethal. And I actually had a meeting, Jim Ferry and I met with him on Friday over Zoom, and I was able to really kind of drill down with him on where this interpretation is creating a problem. He just basically said straight out, include this in your application. I'll make phone calls. He also, I have, you know, attorneys at the state that I want to get in contact with. So I cannot sit here and represent to you that this will happen, that it'll get approved by the division. I can say to you that this is the first time where I'm feeling hopeful, rightly or wrongly, but where I feel like we've got a good case to put forward to the division. And if the division says no, quite honestly, I might come back to you and recommend legal action, because I really do think, and quite honestly, you know, I think with the support that we're finally seeing and that we've been seeing over the past year, it really does, at least I can say to you that we are in a much better position than we have been in prior years in going to the division with this sort of application. And so, you know, when we come back on October 10th with the actual deer management plan application, what I'm going to be drafting for your consideration will absolutely explicitly include a non-lethal component. I mean, let me say, I'm assuming that the council approves the White Buffalo contract tonight, which calls for the non-lethal component as well as what we've done in the past. But assuming that that is the case and that the council wants to go in that direction, then I'm prepared to be very upfront about it in the application and very upfront about why, yes, we'll provide landowner consent forms from all of those property owners where White Buffalo is actually going to be directly conducting its operations, but no, we are not going to provide them for every single property owner in the sterilization area across whose property a doe might wander until the anesthetic takes effect, because that is just, I'm sorry, I'm going to use a legal term of art now, that is simply ridiculous. So That's my update.
Thank you, Trishka. That's very helpful and gives a real context. And I just want to say also something that has happened in the last 10 years or so is the Humane Society has also, as I understand it, changed its mind on whether sterilization is something they would be willing to support.
I can't speak to whether they've changed their mind. I do recall that when we were first looking into implementing the non-lethal, that at that time the Humane Society, and I don't know if that it was limited to them, but I do know that at that time the Humane Society was opposed to sterilization. Plus I don't think that we had the same experience with it that we have now, but that is one of the reasons why Princeton went the route of testing out long-term contraceptives as opposed to pursuing sterilization, because the Humane Society was, at least at that time, opposed to it. I don't know where it stands today.
We used to have a doe that liked to hang out with her triplets in the backyard, and she had those large earrings on that showed that she had gotten the contraceptive, and it's very ironic, but hopefully the sterilization will be a little bit more effective.
I mean, to that point, I do recall when the contraceptive program was ongoing that, the animal control officer, others would get phone calls or emails from residents who felt a lot of affection for the tagged deer, because it was sort of like, oh, look, there's number so-and-so, and they really enjoyed seeing the does with, as you said, their earrings, and in those days, the radio collars.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to read comments from a few people who are eminent in our environmental community here in Princeton, but who weren't able to be here tonight. First is from Wendy Mager, who lives on Cherry Hill Road. I write to comment on the Princeton Deer Management Program. As I understand, the contract with the white buffalo hunters, who are hired to reduce the deer population by lethal means, is scheduled for action at Council's meeting on September 27th. I personally would prefer not to see deer killed. In fact, many years ago, I demonstrated against Princeton's deer management plan and the hiring of white buffalo. That was before I learned, through my membership on the boards of various environmental organizations, such as the Friends of Princeton Open Space and the Watershed Institute, about the damage deer do to New Jersey's forests. Very simply, the large number of deers in our forests is killing our forests. Year after year, the deer browse on the shoots and small saplings that otherwise would mature into large trees, so that they either die or never get much more than a couple of feet tall. Time and again, I have seen this phenomenon in forests I've visited, but more important, it is identified by professionals in the fields of biology and conservation as the biggest threat to our forests in New Jersey. These biologists include Emil DeVito, PhD, an ecologist and veteran of 30 years of managing science and stewardship for New Jersey Conservation Foundation; Tom Gilbert, co-executive director of New Jersey Conservation Foundation; Professor Jay Kelly of Raritan Valley Community College, who has done extensive research on how deer are impacting New Jersey's forests; and Sarah Webb, Professor Emeritus of Environmental Studies at Drew University. Dr. DeVito believes that the deer population needs to be reduced by at least 80% in New Jersey if we are to avoid the devastation of our forests. The old trees will eventually die, and thanks to the deer, there won't be new ones to replace them. What this means is that by not killing deer, we will effectively be killing all the birds, animals, and other organisms that depend on the forest to survive, and dealing a terrible blow to the ecosystem that has sustained human life for thousands of years. I applaud the fact that Princeton is pursuing a non-lethal pilot program that involves sterilization. Hopefully, this way of controlling the deer population can one day replace lethal means. But so far, that is only a hope. In the meantime, the white buffalo contract is necessary to allow our forests to survive and regenerate. That timer is making me very nervous. Here's another comment from Mike Van Cleef, who heads the invasive species strike force here in Princeton. He's the stewardship director for Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space, the program director for the New Jersey Invasive Species Strike Team. Princeton has been a true leader in municipal deer management. The ecological improvements are tangible, and the health of its forests surpasses neighboring municipalities. Preserves such as Herrontown Woods and Autumn Hill have developed a native shrub understory across large areas. Because of the population biology of white-tailed deer, continued annual efforts are essential to maintain past gains, and increased harvesting would allow the most sensitive elements, forest wildflowers, to begin to flourish. I strongly support Princeton's efforts to address deer overabundance moving forward. And the last comment I have is from David Padulo of Maple Street, who is an avid birder and environmental leader in Princeton. I'm writing to you in support of approving the contract award to White Buffalo for specialized deer management services at the council meeting on Tuesday, September 27th. I understand that the deer cull in Princeton can be a contentious topic for the municipality over the years. However, the argument against the use of a deer cull seems to only focus on the deer, which lack a natural predator other than man, and not on the greater damage they do to the rest of our larger biological ecosystem. As an avid birder, I've seen the damage that can be done by the overpopulation of deer that can decimate the understory of plant life in our forests and fields. These habitats support many of our seasonal nesting birds, such as the wood thrush, ovenbirds, black and white warblers, and to a lesser extent, yellow-billed cuckoos and indigo bunting, as well as many others. As a homeowner, I've also had thousands of dollars of landscaping destroyed over the years. That is equally frustrating. As a result, I greatly support the renewal of the White Buffalo contract to manage the deer population in Princeton. I'm sorry I'm not able to attend the meeting in person this week. I hope that you will note this note will serve as my voice and help support the continued successful efforts of deer management by the municipality of Princeton. And I know a couple of other people are going to make comments or in the Zoom audience, so I'll leave them to their comments themselves. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Eve. Michelle?
Thank you. So I just wanted some clarification. We're looking at tagging the deer after they've been sterilized. The doe would then go and be tagged in some way that would, so a year later or 2 years later, she wouldn't be captured again. Would there be a visible sign on her or not? Because that would be, I would think, bad for the deer and costly for, for us to be recapturing the deer. So I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Ryan on that one.
Yeah, they'll be required to be marked because we'll have to put a do not consume advisory on there in case the animal was hit by a car and somebody wanted to eat that animal. And we wouldn't go back. They would live with the ear tags for the rest of their life. And for the animal, it's similar to wearing earrings, right? Yeah. It's no different. Livestock have ear tags, whether it's sheep, cows, goats. It's definitely not as natural as it would be without them, but the amount of effort it would require to go back and just remove the tags would be, doesn't make non-feasible. It just wouldn't be a judicious use of money.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure there was some visible sign. And then, we talked about, keeping the population reduced. But obviously, we would want to decimate. I've heard a lot of reasons why we don't want the deer, but I think, personally, I think we all still want to see some deer in our community. So to keep to that, or try and get to that 24, 25 deer per square mile as a goal, how would we manage that? Would we have to, every year, annually, contract with the drone company? I mean, how are we going to keep tabs on where we are? Should we get to that level balance if we do the sterilization on an ongoing basis?
Jim, do you want me to I could probably answer that a little bit. In the past, what Princeton did was try to do periodic actual counts or the distance sampling estimates, which is actually a fairly reliable measure. Do that every other year, every third year. In between, you can get a pretty decent estimate of the population just based on mortality statistics. So the deer harvest numbers from your own program, from recreational hunters, the MVAs that Jim records, the other statistics that Jim maintains. It's not going to give you an exact count to the deer, but it gives you a pretty good estimate of where you are. And it certainly gives you, the relative tracking data. Are you trending up? Are you trending down? And so I think ultimately whether you do drone counts annually or not that's going to be up to the council, because it also costs money. That's your choice. But the way it was done in the past, the balance that was struck was, rather than incurring that cost every single year, it was do it every other year, every third year, and in between just kind of use those statistics to keep tabs and get a fairly reliable estimate of where you are.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. And then my last question to the same point is, I guess we would continue the bow and arrow hunting combined with this to reach that certain point, or what is the thought there?
Yeah, I'll address that as well, because some of it is just factual based on my experience and my conversations over the years with White Buffalo, but also from dealing with the state and the approval process. Sort of fundamentally, the state are actually, the deer are a state-owned resource, which is why the state controls who can hunt, how you can hunt, when you can hunt. It's their deer, to put it very plainly. The preference is always for controlling deer through traditional recreational hunting, and then you use again, what's called under state law, the alternate deer management methods as a supplement. So, you're not obligated to continue to allow bow hunting or other recreational hunting on Princeton-owned properties, but there's two reasons why you probably will need to. One, it is considered a recreational activity, and when you have open space preserved through Green Acres money, quite frankly, it is supposed to, it's there for recreation. Now, I don't think Green Acres has ever taken the position that means you must allow hunting. There may be all sorts of reasons why you can't. However, hunting is a recreational activity, so you can already see how it starts to skew in that direction. Plus, the state is always going to be reluctant to allow municipalities to use alternate deer management methods to the exclusion of recreational hunting. It's one thing to come in and say, we need this to supplement. I don't see the state ever saying, yeah, that's fine, just do that and don't worry about the recreational hunting. So I think just as a practical matter. Okay. And then the last thing is it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, right.
And I might add, that's also how White Buffalo views its efforts. White Buffalo is not interested in displacing recreational hunting. White Buffalo really, it's sort of like it's coming in and batting cleanup, as it were.
Supplemental, yeah. Okay.
They come in again to try to supplement all the other efforts that are ongoing.
Okay, thank you.
Add a quick note too, that John and his crew does report all the harvest to us, and we include that in our numbers and our plan going forward. Age, sex, location of the animals taken, and that helps us keep the annual goal down. We've dropped from 300 per year to try to get our numbers down to 100 this year.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add one more thing, just to your underlying point or assumption. This is not about exterminating the deer. It's never been about exterminating the deer. It's always been about trying to reduce the population in an effort to maintain an ecological balance. But it has never been about exterminating the deer. Plus, I just don't think that, you just could never get there, I think, no matter what you did. But that's never, ever been the goal of the program from day one.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the clarification. They don't have a natural predator other than us, so yeah, it's unfortunate. Thank you.
And I
Leticia?
just want to
Yes,
jump in real
thank-
quick, just to say that all the meat, all the deer that are killed as part of White Buffalo are donated to food banks, and our animal control officer, Jim Ferry, is in charge of that and brings that to a local place, and then that food gets distributed. So there's no waste involved. Just want to make that point.
Yeah, that's correct.
Leticia?
First, I want to thank you for the detailed presentation. It was very informative. I do have a question. I understand that, and I also want to applaud the use of non-lethal methods to cull the deer to control the population. And my question is, I understand that the deer that have been sterilized get tagged, and that there's designated areas where this would take place. But if a deer that have been sterilized happens to stray into another area, are they protected from lethal methods? And if yes, how?
Excellent question. Ryan?
Yeah, generally, I'll speak to that. And a lot of that's determined, like, obviously, we can, as White Buffalo, we can choose to harm that animal or not. We can't stipulate that a recreational hunter cannot remove that animal. The likelihood that they're going to wander outside their home range, which is typically fairly small in suburbia, is a pretty low likelihood. The real risk of these treated deer being harvested through hunting is fairly low, right? These are areas where we're not currently effectively managing the deer. You know, it's really deer vehicle collisions that are keeping the numbers down, or animals getting caught in fences, or some other non-lethal method humans are right intentionally. So, you know, the council can say, yeah, we spent money on sterilizing these deer. We don't want them harvested by White Buffalo. You can ask John and his crew through the recreational program that you guys support to not harvest those animals if that's your wish. And obviously we'll honor that. But outside of that, on the recreational aspect, we won't be able to control that. If a hunter wants to harvest that animal, they can do that. And as long as it's over I think it's the withdrawal period is 3 months for the controlled substances that we're using. So by the next field season, they would be able to harvest that animal and consume it just like any other deer. So, you know, that would be up to council how they would want to address that.
Okay, thank you. That's actually what I would prefer, but I guess we need to discuss that if we wanted to stipulate that.
Yeah, definitely. Leighton?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Kind of got a statement and a question. There don't seem to be many deer advocates on board, and while I certainly appreciate the Emerald Necklace, the native trees, and all that we have in and around Princeton, I also appreciate seeing the beautiful deer out and about. And I guess, and let me just ask another question. I thought I heard at one point the statement that it would be easier to curb the male deer than the female deer. It appears that from the pictures, the sterilization method is a pretty intense procedure for a doe, is it not?
No, you're correct. From a surgical sterilization standpoint, the surgery is much easier on a male. The difficulty is that one male can breed multiple females, and they typically do during the breeding season. So if you miss one male, all of your efforts are negated, right? Because you're never going to achieve the 90% female reproduction that you're going to need. So in a closed population, possible, right? We're doing a study on Staten Island in New York that's looking at that currently, but that's a closed population. You're not going to get any immigration or very, very little immigration onto the island. So when you have an open population similar to Princeton, you would literally need to capture every single male in order to curb reproduction, and you have to prevent new males from coming in.
Okay, it just seems like the males are walking around, the bucks are walking around scot-free with not a care in the world, and and the females are getting all the heat. Just doesn't seem fair to me.
Sounds.
But
I was
okay.
going to say it sounds familiar.
Happen in life, Elaine.
Mia, did you have a?
Well, I was going to make the same comment that apparently with deer, it's the same as with humans. But I just wanted to thank, all of you, and particularly Jeff, for and Bernie and Trishka for meeting with Ray Lesniak and for being open to this. I think I realize that it will be a slow process forward, but I'm so proud that we're doing it, and I hope we can lead the way for the rest of the state. And it's an overused adage, but just remembering that Gandhi said you judge a civilization by how they treat their animals, and I think the same can be said for a municipality. And I'm really so very, very pleased that we're moving in this direction. So,
Do we have any other council questions or comments before we look at the next item, which is a resolution? Oh,
If I
thank
don't,
you. Yeah.
I would like to just make a comment that Princeton didn't stop using sterilization on their own. It was really the change in how the state viewed the regulation, why we stopped the non-lethal portion of the program. That actually, the program went from 2003 to 2006. It was voted on by council in 2007 to move forward, and the change happened. That's why it stopped. Princeton's always been a leader in deer management. A lot of the litigation that Trish fought precedent for a lot of the other communities that we've worked in. And some of the ordinance that she's written has been modeled by multiple communities throughout the United States. So I think it's a feather in Princeton's hat that they have led on this issue since 2000. So it's something that it's been really impactful on a wider scale than just Princeton itself. It's really from Princeton all the way to California, as far north as Minnesota and as far south as Florida. So I'm proud to have been a part of this project from 2000.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, public comment on this? Anyone in the room that just, if you come up and state your name and address, and the timer's going to start, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me through my mask? Am I not on?
And if you just try to get your mouth close to that microphone, it should hopefully work.
Thank you. Is this better?
Yeah.
Kathy Alesh from 85 Mason Drive, and I just want to start by saying that my husband, Richard Levine, and I have hosted white buffalo on our property for a couple of years for the lethal component of netting the animals and culling the herd. And when we first started...
Ms. Kelly, can you speak up a little bit, please?
Maybe I need to take this off. We have hosted white buffalo on our property for a couple of years, and they're extremely professional. Initially, when I heard what the process was, I was really terribly upset that it would be traumatic for the community and for myself were I to witness this. But I have to say that the way they handled it was remarkable, and I'm not convinced that the non-lethal approach will be any less traumatic for the animals than the lethal approach. I just want to say that. But regardless of what the council decides, I personally fully support controlling deer management and the plan, and think that we've had very good experiences with white buffalo. And well, I applaud their efforts, and I applaud your efforts for considering them. And I want to echo Mr. Newland's comments about the males versus the females, because that also doesn't really make sense to me, why you think you're going to get better control by getting the females as opposed to the males. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room that wants to make a comment on this topic? Okay. Adam, can we flip over to the folks on Zoom and see if there's a hand up? All right. Joel, I think, Joel, you might be able to speak at this point.
Hi. Yeah, my name's Joel Abraham. I'm a PhD student from Princeton. And Eve actually, in preparing for this discussion, Eve reached out to me, kind of to consult about the deer management program. And I met with Cindy and Jim and Trishka and everyone. And I was just really impressed by how much data they have to kind of back up all these decisions. And I think that's a really important part of this too, that this is like a really data-driven program that's really being informed by all of the patterns that have been observed thus far. And so I also just kind of want to lend my approval of the program as well. And this is something that's very close to home for me. I research the impacts of large mammals like deer on ecosystems. So yeah, I'm just thumbs up from from me for the program.
Thank you. All right, Adam, do we have other? Okay, Catherine? Nope, no, Catherine disappeared. Yeah, oh, sorry, Winifred?
Hi, my name is Winifred Spar. I live on 50 Wheatsheaf Lane in Princeton. And I want to speak in strong support of the deer management program as a longtime birder in Princeton. I do most of my birding in the Rogers Refuge and the Institute Woods, right in the center of town here. And they provide, I think, a perfect test case of the efficacy of the deer management in the last 20 years or so. As a birder, I've been birding there for over 35 years. I can literally see the difference. 20 years or more ago, before the cull, the understory was very sparse, heavily browsed by deer. You could see through the woods. There was nothing between the trees, no understory to stop your view. And today, the improvement is very clearly visible. Native spicebush, which was nearly wiped out, has returned. Habitat for birds and other wildlife has been largely restored in both the woods and the marsh. Ground nesting and ground foraging birds like the beautiful eastern towhee have returned after decades of absence, while other species, including the ovenbird and the globally endangered wood thrush, the beautiful singer of the woods in the summer, these other species have dramatically increased in numbers. So that it is something that is very visible, palpable, really there, and you can see it within 20 years if you spend a lot of time birding in the woods. And I think our natural open spaces, which are so central to Princeton's identity, would soon revert to their former sorry condition without a regular program of deer management. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Adam, do we have more folks? All right, is anybody else on Zoom that wants to make a comment? Just raise your hand there if you do. All right, I don't see any more hands up on Zoom. So, I'm sorry?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank all the staff that have been involved in this, Trishka, Cindy, Jim, Ferry, Ryan, thank you so much. It's really been a lot of work to pull all the information together and to present this, and thank you to those who sent in comments. And Winnie and Joel, thank you for speaking tonight in support of this important program that really, the focus, as many people have said, is ecological balance, and that's really crucial to our environment, especially as we enter a time of, greater increasing climate change. So just a thank you to everyone who helped.
Okay, are we ready to go to the resolution? Looks like we are. Okay, 22-340, resolution of Mayor and Council of Princeton approving award of contract for extraordinary unspecifiable services to White Buffalo, Inc. for specialized deer management services. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I apologize, but just before you ask for the motion, I just wanted to note for the council, I did have to make a few wordsmithing changes to the agreement that was in your packet. None of the substance has changed. It's literally just tightening up some language here and there to ensure that we're very clear about the type of landowner consent that we will and will not be able to provide, as I had explained earlier this evening. So the substance is the same, but I did want to alert you that there's been a little bit of further wordsmithing since we sent you the agreement.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. Is there someone want to make that motion? Eve has the motion. Is there a second? Leticia's got the second. Any questions or comments on the motion? See none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then Trishka, the next resolution, we're holding off till the next meeting?
Yes, the plan originally had been to also have the community-based deer management plan application on tonight's agenda, but with all the late-breaking changes on Friday, that just wasn't feasible, so we'll be bringing that to you at the October 10th meeting. So the resolution 22-341, which endorses that plan, we're just asking to have that moved to October.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to, so again, thank you all for the presentation and your time. Ryan, thanks. And we're going to move on to go into a work session. We have 3 items, and the first item is the Mercer at Play grant.
Okay.
And Evan Moorhead, our Recreation Director, I think, is going to...
Mayor, I just had a quick question.
I'm sorry.
I thought that when we went back to in person, we were not going to be reading comments. Did we change that, or what?
What we agreed to was that if we were no longer going to have the email access for people not at the meeting to send comments in through the email that we would read. I think it's up to individual council members if they want to make an exception to that, or not that we need to decide it now, but I mean, it's a good question, and maybe...
Oh, no, I thought we
could-
were changing the policy, because sometimes I've been telling people I can't read your statement because you now have to come in person, so I just wanted to know.
Yeah. No, it's good. Thanks
I
for
wasn't
asking.
trying to evade any rules. I did check with the mayor, and he said we're not using the Princeton comments anymore, but in the past, people have read statements.
But we can read.
Pre-COVID, so I thought that was kosher, but we can discuss.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
Yeah.
Mayor.
Okay, well, we'll pay a little more attention to that, but, okay, go ahead.
And, is it okay? I wanted to just tee up and say a few words before.
Yes, thank you.
Is that all right? If we're ready to move on. Thank you. So thanks. I just wanted to mention, we, the Recreation Department has worked really hard putting this recommendation together tonight for council for consideration for the Hilltop Park. As you remember, the Mercer at Play grant from the county is available to us. We had a matching grant for that, and we're going to discuss tonight the recommendations from the Recreation Department. The concept of doing an adaptive playground is something that's really would be a first of its kind for Princeton. It would be a wonderful addition to our community, and Evan Moorhead, our Recreation Department head, will explain more in detail the features of this. But I'd just like to mention that we're really committed to doing an investment for Hilltop Park. So this is all about Hilltop Park tonight, facilities and other investment that we'd like to do. And I just want to extend my gratitude to Evan and his team, Joe and the Rec Commission, and thank you. So please go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Perrone-Lambros, Mayor, members of council, for having us here tonight. With me is Joe Maroli. I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to meet Joe or not. He's our Assistant Director of Recreation, by way of introduction here tonight. Also, a couple folks that I'd like to acknowledge over my left shoulder who are also here with us tonight. We had a 3-member subgroup of the Recreation Commission that helped the staff navigate through this process and bring us to where we are here tonight. 2 of those are here with us tonight, Dick Nosker and Aaron Burt. The 3rd member is the Recreation Chairman, Darius Young, who's not here. Also with us tonight from the Recreation Commission is Andrew Kuntz, who's also a county commissioner. The county commission will, as you know, is ultimately be responsible for voting on the resolution that will come before this body for at a later date to pass this, hopefully this proposal that I'm going to present to you tonight. It is a work session, and so that the resolution obviously would happen at a later date. As was mentioned previously, I think it's worth noting that we won't be asking for any new money. Just like to say that up front, there's been money approved for the prior project, and so there's enough there between the county grant and the matching money that was already approved by this body, so that we can fund what we're going to propose here tonight. And so we have something that we're very excited about, and that we're going to walk through a few slides here, and then have time for questions at the end. So, Joe, if you want to. Our proposed park improvements for Hilltop Park would be to replace the current aging playground equipment with all new inclusive playgrounds. That would be, as was mentioned, an adaptive inclusive playground. We would remove the existing pathway from the parking lot to the playground in order to replace it with an ADA compliant pathway. It's currently not ADA compliant. We would replace the existing ball field lights with more energy efficient LED sports field lighting. Just to emphasize, that's only to replace the existing lights. We're not proposing putting any new permanent lighting that's not already at that location. We would install a batting cage, and then we would also do some repair work to the basketball court that's currently there. What is an inclusive playground? An inclusive playground is a playground that brings together people of all ages and abilities. It's about breaking down barriers, the objective being to find a place where children of different abilities and interests can all play together and where no child is excluded. The equipment itself that would be part of this playground is developmentally appropriate and challenging for children with or without disabilities. And it's important to note that this equipment is designed and selected with to intentionally provide opportunities in 5 key areas: cognitive, social, emotional, physical, sensory, and communication. There's some slides here that we're going to walk through. This is an aerial overhead of the proposed playground. Just to kind of put it in context, to the left would be Bunn Drive, to the far right would be the existing main athletic field, and to the bottom would be where the parking lot restroom building currently sit. This is just an angle of the playground. It gives you an idea of some of the different features that would be there. We have several different angles on this. As you see, there's some shade canopies there as part of the playground to provide shade. That's one thing we hear at a lot of our park facilities is more shade. We hear it at the pool a lot. We hear it at some of the parks, and so we're cognizant of that and want to make sure we take that into consideration. And so you'll see that in some of these slides where there's, in addition to all the playground pieces, they have built-in shade canopies. It's another angle. You'll see there's different swings as part of this. They are the some of what you would consider the traditional bucket swings, and then to the right there, expression swings, where you can have a child in the swing and then a parent or caregiver sitting facing that child. And so that would be a new addition, something that's not currently, that we don't currently have at any of our parks. Just wanted to highlight that. Here's another angle, and you can see the main tower. You can see also some other slides as part of this, different, the balance beam, horizontal bars at different heights, parallel bars, a lot of your traditional equipment, but also a lot of equipment that is designed and adapted for a playground of this type, which we're proposing. That's a picture of what's called a communication board for children that might be nonverbal. This has pictures of the different equipment that's available at the playground and allows them a chance to point to what they might wish to visit or play. Also a swing there, it's called I believe the arch swing in the background, as well as the arch sensory wave climber, I believe it's called. There's a lot of new names of equipment that I'm learning here as we go through this process that we don't currently have. So what are the highlights? As I mentioned before, we replaced the aging equipment with brand new inclusive playground equipment. This playground would have poured in place rubber surfacing, which would take the place of the wood mulch that we currently have. That's going to provide improved accessibility throughout the playground for all playground users. If you recall, this is the surface that was installed when we redid Mary Moss Playground back in 2018. Been very well received, and we would like to have that there at Hilltop as part of this playground project. The design also increases the usability for people of all ages and abilities by including ADA accessible ramps and wider decks. The layout itself encourages movement and social interaction while also allowing opportunities for solo play and sensory relief for those children that may need it or may not want to play in the group or at any particular moment. As you see, there's this in the slides we previously showed, there's the centerpieces, but then on the perimeter there are a lot of individual components that children can play with based on whatever their interests at that time may be. There are a wide variety of different components, as I mentioned previously. The hope is that we are appealing to kids of all ages, abilities, interests, and as I said before, nobody is excluded. This would be our first inclusive playground, and so in that respect alone, we think it would be a great addition to what we currently have in our inventory at our parks. This is just a list of some of the different components that are in there. It's not all of them, but these are some of them I just wanted to pull out and highlight. We did our best to pack in as much as we could into the space. It's a pretty big footprint as far as the playground area at Hilltop, and we are doing our best to take advantage of that and have worked with the playground representative with the company to fit in as many different components and activities and a variety of things that we possibly could. And so the things you see there mentioned, some of which I talked about before, but you'll see the list there, and we're pretty excited about those, about many of these pieces. Additional improvements, I mentioned the shade canopies for playground users. We would also add some new benches, both for seating and for picnic benches, some new trash receptacles, and as I mentioned before, the pathway from the parking lot to the playground would need to be updated to make sure it's fully ADA compliant. Right now, the cross slopes would not meet full ADA compliance, so that would need to be a part of this project. One other piece that is not on there, but I just wanted to mention is something that we're considering, and we're open to input from folks, is the idea of fencing in the playground itself. It's something we've heard concern about with just making sure that the kids that are using the playground don't have the ability to wander off, particularly with the demographic that we're targeting. There is currently a fence that separates the athletic field from the playground. Now there's no other fencing around it until you get to, there's a split rail fence that borders the very edge of the park property along Bund Drive. So we're considering either the possibility of a full fencing of that playground or possibly a partial fencing that would maybe go along the border, kind of separate it from the wood line there between on the Copperwood side, and maybe buffer it also on the street side. And so we're open to input on that. Certainly if we did that, we wouldn't be we look at something a little more decorative than a chain link fence, something maybe along the lines of what we did at Mary Moss that seems to be more aesthetically appealing. So just something I want to throw out there for input from the council and residents as well. Quickly, I just want to move through the other enhancements that we are proposing. This particular picture that's up there now speaks to the field lighting that we are proposing. This is for illustrative purposes, but this is a before and after picture from athletic complex at Villanova University. Hopefully it's noticeable from this picture how different the before and after are, and you'll see there's much less glare in the after, and that the light is much more directed down towards the playing field, which is what we would hope to achieve by replacing the current lights that are at the Hilltop Ball Field, which were installed, I believe, late 80s or early 90s. So they're reaching the end of their lifespan. Technology is extremely outdated at this point. And so the benefits of going this route would be distribution of light that's much more directed and precise, with less light spilling outside the playing area. We believe this would be a really big benefit to the neighbors. The LED lights will increase the safety for the participants on the field. The current lights really don't meet the industry standards for on-field light level, and so that's a safety concern, and this would address that. The LED lights, as we all know, it's a sustainability issue, and they're much more energy efficient than current lights. And as I mentioned before, they are 30 years old. What this project would entail, there's 6 existing light towers there, poles that are currently there. They would remain, and the light harnesses, the bulbs and the harnesses that are currently on the top of those poles would come down, and they would install the new LED lights on the existing poles and do some rewiring, and so that's what that project would entail. They wouldn't need to install any new poles beyond what's currently there on the baseball, softball field. We're also proposing adding a batting cage at Hilltop. It is currently the only baseball field in Princeton that does not have a batting cage, and so we would like to change that. There's a picture there of what we would propose. That's the current batting cage at Smoyer Park. We would propose to add a batting cage in the location that you see there in the picture on the right at Hilltop, which is along the left field, third base side of the Hilltop ball field there. The basketball court picture, a couple pictures, you see that it's in need of some crack repair, some power washing, maybe some repainting of lines. We'd also like to replace the backboards, add the backboards that have the orange trim, as well as the square on the back that you see at a lot of our other parks. Just makes it a more inviting place for playing. Just a small thing, but a needed touch, I think, to help spruce that basketball court back up a little bit. So in review, we're focusing, as Ms. Perron-Lambros said, on Hilltop Park. That's what our original design was, and so when we pivoted, about 1.5 years ago with this project, and we went back to the drawing board, we took with us the concerns that we heard from residents and neighbors, and so we worked with those, and we have come up with a proposal that we think is really going to bring some much needed upgrades and changes, not only to Hilltop but to Princeton, adding an inclusive playground. We have been in touch with some of the neighbors in the Hilltop area, the Campbell Woods Homeowners Association, PCV Management, because we wanted to work with them through this process and make sure they were up to speed on what we were proposing before we got to this point. And so brings us to where we are tonight, where we have the opportunity to do something that I think would put us at the forefront of a new playground trend with an inclusive playground, as well as doing some other very nice upgrades that will enhance the user experience and enhance the safety for for the park users. And so I think that'll be a real win for the community. And open to questions or comments at this time.
Thanks, Evan. David?
Yeah, two questions. I think this playground looks sensational. I actually, yesterday I would have said I'd never seen anything like it before, but I actually was at one up in Raritan Township yesterday afternoon, and it was very, very cool. Just a minor question. Michelle talks a lot about different age-appropriate playground structures, the 2 to 5-year-old and the 5 to 12. It looks like you don't have the space to have both age ranges here, but can you just confirm whether that's the case?
That's correct. So this is primarily designed, well, I shouldn't say primarily, it's designed for all ages. It's designated a 5 to 12, but because of the nature of the playground with the ramps and the easier access, it's appropriate, as are many of the components can be used 2 to 5 or 5 to 12. We didn't have enough space to do the standalone separate and still be able to do some of the perimeter pieces that we wanted to do, but we've been, in working with our playground company, they said this is where you get the most bang for your buck. And in all reality, many, if not all, of the features are appropriate for kids of all ages.
Okay. And my other question relates to the basketball court. I hope that you're really doing a thorough, rebuild. I'm making the comment because I play tennis at the CP tennis courts, and year after year they get patched in a very, I'm trying to think of a synonym that I can say on.
Less than ideal.
Yes. It's really a hazard actually, because they patch these cracks with a built up something that goes on top of them, and it's not a smooth surface. It's easy to trip or slip, twist an ankle if you're running over it, and the ball does not bounce clean. And I would assume the same problems would come with doing a patchy kind of repair rather than a resurfacing. So I hope you're able to really resurface it.
We will certainly look to do everything that we can with that. I understand what you're saying. The freeze-thaw cycle in New Jersey is not kind to all of our court surfaces, tennis, basketball alike. And so we do varying degrees of resurfacing depending on how much money we have budgeted at any particular time in any given year. And certainly we'll look to do there what we can. Generally speaking, what they do in a more elaborate process, they will fill it with a caulk material and almost put like a membrane over top of it to patch it and seal that gap, and then repaint over top of that. And so that tends to hold up better than maybe just some simple crack repair. But it does, over time, in this climate, they all tend to re-crack, and it's an ongoing issue.
It's an uneven surface when you do that, when you don't resurface the whole thing. So I don't know how much money you've got in the budget, but for the basketball, and I know you guys don't really manage the CP tennis court, so this was not meant as a critique of the rec department. That's Princeton tennis program, right?
Well, the tennis courts are owned by the town, and so PTP leases them, but the upkeep, we work with them on the upkeep. Fortunately for you, there is another project in the works with the CP South 3 design where
yes,
you'll have a chance to voice your concerns about the tennis courts, and maybe there will be actually an opportunity to overhaul them completely, because
but this
that is
was
a much more.
This was more to the basketball court. This comment, yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, David. Leticia and then Eve.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for that presentation. I really am impressed with all the work that went into it and how you were, I think, did a really good job of finding how to best use of the funds that are available. I think it would be a great addition to our community, having a playground that will be accessible and welcoming to many of our youth who may not have been able to make use of other playgrounds. But I also want to take the opportunity I'd like to plant seeds for future consideration. Over the years, I have heard from many parents and young kids who really enjoy skateboarding. And we know that there's a skate park up on Hilltop, but it may not always be accessible unless someone has a ride for our young children who live on this side of town. And from what I understand, there was a petition that was being started, I don't know how long ago, was being started by some youth who would like to have something more accessible on this side of town. I don't know if it's made its way to the rec department yet, but I do know that it's something that has been, many parents have asked whether we would ever put something that's more accessible on this side of town. So I just want to plant that seed for future consideration whenever we do have the opportunity and have funds available for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Eve?
Thank you. Evan and Joe, really thank you for this project and the rest of the rec board as well. From my perspective, this is something that really adds to the community, to all the people who live there, and benefits the people in the community very directly, as well as the broader community. I love that the lights are being upgraded and will be less intrusive, because that was something that we heard a lot. And the visual that you showed, picture's worth 1,000 words, like that picture really got across how much better the new lighting will be, as well as be energy efficient. So just incredible compliments for really taking a lemon and making, I don't know, Kool-Aid, lemonade, whatever. I'm very impressed and really happy about this. I did have one question, of course. I'm wondering about stormwater runoff on the new surface as compared to the old surface. I would think that the wood mulch would be pretty absorbent, and I'm wondering what kind of thought has gone into that. Does engineering weigh in on this? Do one of our consultants who have an expertise in stormwater weigh in? Because certainly we wouldn't want to make things worse for our neighbors in that regard.
We could certainly ask those folks to weigh in. We haven't up to this point. Those poured-in-place drains vertically, and so we haven't had any issues at Mary Moss in that regard. There's no indication that we need to put in any additional drainage there. Poured-in-place mulch, the water tends to pool up actually in different areas, depending on where the low-lying areas are, because we constantly have to regrade it. The mulch gets moved around, or the weather wears it down, particularly in the wintertime or the late fall with a lot of icy weather, snowy weather, rainy weather. And so this will actually make it much easier from a maintenance standpoint. It should drain very evenly. There's no indication there that we need to be concerned about that, but we'll double check.
Yeah, excellent. That's a win-win. Yeah, when I think about Mary Moss, I've never seen water pooling there. So that's great. Thank you.
Mia?
I think all the superlatives have already been used up, but I agree with them all. This is really a fantastic asset, and it will mean so much to the parents and families who will be able to use it. The pivot I know was challenging, but you have really come through with a fantastic new plan. I'm just wondering, you know, to make sure that the space is used primarily for the children and families for whom it is designed for that demographic. Is there any concern about, you know, it being possibly, I mean, it's by other children, I mean, how can you make sure that it's used maximally by the children for whom it's designed? Is that a concern, or?
Well, the term inclusive means that we want all kids to use it.
Okay.
So kids with disabilities, kids without disabilities, all of them. And so we're not concerned about limiting it. We certainly want to get the word out to everybody once it's built and is open.
Okay.
So we will work through our network of folks. There may be some who are on Zoom tonight who we've already notified about this, proposal, and so they certainly will also do word of mouth. But we don't intend to want or need to limit the kids to use it.
Okay, that's even better. So, great, thanks.
Clayton?
Thanks, Mayor. Commendations on the job well done. The design looks awesome. I wish I could go back a few years and actually play there myself. Want to acknowledge the individuals on your team who came here with you tonight. I think this is a win-win for everybody, and I also want to acknowledge Andrew Kuntz, who has for a long time served on the Board of Recreation, and for helping us achieve this dollars to put this whole thing together. Thank you, sir.
Any other council questions or comments on this? Evan, Joe, anything else you were hoping we'd ask that you had a great answer for, or anything like that?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is a great project. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Andrew, did you want to?
Andrew Kuntz, Mercer County Commissioner. I just wanted to lift this microphone up so I can speak more easily. I just wanted to sort of refresh everyone's memory as to the purpose of the Mercer at Play grant. The grant, both this iteration and the earlier iteration, that's like its principal focus is to focus on childhood obesity and combating childhood obesity. So I really think that the Recreation Commission and the Recreation Department have made a great step here, because if we're looking towards a population in which it is most difficult to tackle that particular problem, this is the population. I also think that in going forward, to speak to the point that Councilwoman Sachs raised, that as we go forward and looking at our playgrounds and turning our attention to the older ones and rehabilitation, that this is the way that we really ought to have been going. In the wake of the Americans with Disabilities Act, really all playgrounds should be this way. Yes, this is our first step here in Princeton, but this should be the way of the future. Inclusive playgrounds where all children have the ability to play and play with one another. And it really builds on some of the things that we've built into our recreation offerings here in town. The zero depth entry at our community park pool. The spray grounds are inclusive recreational amenities. And so this really builds upon that, and I think it's a great step. I have one personal favor to ask, though, if I could, and it may not work. But the resolution, the contract that exists between Princeton and Mercer County at this time, that I think it may have even been called the Freeholder Board at the time, passed, is for the old project. And so the County Commission needs a new resolution. My term ends December 31st. I would really like to be able to vote on this particular project from Princeton. So, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But I would really like to be able to vote on the amended contract that would put this project and make it go forward. So thank you very much for all your work, and let's get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
May I
Other comments from anyone in the room? Yes, sir. Please just step up, state your name and address.
Yeah, Chris Johnson. I'm a resident at Bird Drive. I'm also the president of the Board of Trustees for Campbell Woods. I think this is terrific. Thank you very much to Evan and the Rec Commission for listening to feedback from my community and my neighbors and really making a responsive design to the concerns of our community and our neighbors. So thank you so much for that. Had 3 comments and a question. If we're looking for having an inclusive playground, one thing for future consideration, maybe not part of this particular project, is the restroom facility there, which I can't imagine is accessible. I even have a hard time turning on the faucet in the bathroom, and I don't think that there's a wheelchair accessible stall in either restroom. So for future consideration, if you want it to be a fully inclusive playground, keep that in mind. The comment about the fence, Evan, you were asking for feedback on the fence. I don't think I would be in favor of that. There's a lot of built up, construction in the area with Copperwood and PCV and Campbell Woods and the skate park. So having another fence there, not necessarily in favor, but I'd be open to looking at a design to see if it really kind of fits in with the aesthetic of the park. Regarding kind of just safety of the area in general, there's a lot of trees that have been obliterated by the ash borer, in particular on the border between Hilltop Park and Copperwood. So if we're going to have a lot more kids there, which I hope we do, and it's children that have less mobility, and there's branches from dead trees coming down, that might be something to look at to make sure that it's as safe as it can be, because they might not be able to get out of the way as quickly. So those are my 3 comments, and the question is, are you planning to take out any of the existing trees that are there? I noticed on the playground that it looks like you're building in some artificial canopy, which is great, because when I'm up there with my daughter and we're getting all muddy and need some shade, it'll be nice to have that. There's not a whole lot of trees outside of the perimeter of the park, so I wanted to know if you're planning to take out any trees, and if so, I would advocate to take out as few as possible. Thank you.
Just to answer quickly, we have no plans to take out any of the existing trees. Our hope would be to preserve it. We haven't even had that discussion that it would be needed.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your comments. All right, is there anyone on Zoom that wants to? I'm sorry?
There's somebody.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll get to you on Zoom in just a second. Thanks.
Hi, Erica Mosner, a resident of Princeton Community Village, and I didn't plan to speak, and but this looks like a wonderful project. I think the only thing that I would say is that I wonder whether, and for those who don't know, the village is subsidized housing, so none of us are property owners, and some of you know that this is sort of an issue that's come up for us before. I wonder, I hope that some of my neighbors were consulted about this in addition to the management, because I will say that the management was kind enough to send us a notification that this was going to be on the agenda tonight, but I didn't really know why or what anything, that this was about. And I've been attending the council meetings anyway, so I came to hear about this, and this sounds like a win-win. But I think I shouldn't miss the opportunity to say once again that there are probably 600 people who live in the village, and I'm the only one here to say anything and to compliment all the work that's been done. And that feels a little funny. So just want to make a note of that, and thank you for what looks like it's going to be a great project.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, is there anybody else in the room? Okay, going back to Zoom, looks like we have a hand up. Tracy?
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Tracy O'Toole, and I live at 292 Ridgeview Road. I am the current co-president of the Special Education Parent Advisory Group to the school district here in Princeton. And tonight, I wanted to lend my support for the inclusive playground design that Evan and his team have presented. As the commission knows, true equity and inclusion in our community does not happen by accident, and it is important that Princeton is very intentional at providing inclusive recreation opportunities. As has been mentioned, Princeton does not currently offer an adaptive playground in our community, and this project will provide critical, equitable access to children of all abilities in Princeton. And I think it's really key, as has been noted earlier, that this will be a challenging and fun space for community members with and without disabilities. So it's really leveling the playing field and promoting inclusive recreation. Tonight, I also wanted to just voice my appreciation for the Princeton Recreation team. Over the last year, they have listened to the community and identified the lack of adaptive recreation opportunities available for our special needs community members, both for our children and adults. Princeton Rec, in response, has been very open to discussion and dialogue with the special needs community and has developed truly engaging adaptive recreation opportunities for our community. It is wonderful, as a special needs parent myself, to see the demonstrated commitment to accessibility and inclusion by the Princeton Recreation team. All of the children in our community are benefiting from this fantastic programming. So kudos to the recreation team for the proposal for this playground and for all of the adaptive recreation programs that they have been rolling out over the last year. And I strongly encourage the council to support this inclusive playground proposal at Hilltop. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, anyone else out there on Zoom that wants to make a comment? Okay. I think we're all good. Any other council comments or questions? We're all good. Okay. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have a work session on Witherspoon Street parking, updates since the September 12th work session. Jim, I think this is you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Give technology a couple seconds to get the PowerPoint presentation up. Adam. Thank you, Adam. As you recall, 2 weeks ago, we appeared in front of you with some recommendations on what to do about the service lane between Nassau Street and Spring Street, as we're reconstructing the area, and it will be open to traffic in a short period of time. I do need to make an announcement that although 2 weeks ago we believed that they would be done in this section by the end of October, they have been delayed, but they do promise that they will be out of here by Thanksgiving. So we're still on track to not be in the way during the holiday season. Our recommendation at the time had been that we would designate the service lane as loading zone up until as late as 5 p.m. and then 3-hour parking in between. We did hear from council, and we also heard from the business community that they did not, that having that long a loading zone time frame was not something that they wanted. And they also were not thrilled with having 3-hour parking. They would like to see, the business community would like to see their patrons rotate in and out more quickly. We subsequently met with the Princeton Business Partnership and a small subcommittee of that partnership, which represented the businesses along this block of Witherspoon Street, and a consensus was reached that the loading should only be Monday through Saturday from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. They promised to work with their vendors and get deliveries only during that time period as much as possible. Any deliveries outside that time period could be accommodated elsewhere, and I will talk a little bit about that. One of the caveats here, though, was that at this time, in this time period, there are some of the businesses are open, and so they did want to have the ability for patrons to stop on the street, run in and pick up merchandise, in particular coffee. at 6 o'clock in the morning is always something very important. So we agreed to provide a 3-minute free parking for merchandise pickup, passenger loading, and unloading. There is a similar type of provision over on Palmer Square where 3-minute passenger loading and unloading in a loading zone is allowed. So this is not too dissimilar from that. We also had a discussion internally with our parking staff, and in order to move to 30-minute free parking and not have meters, first of all, we had decided from a streetscape standpoint that we did not want this brand new street, which is much more pedestrian friendly, to be cluttered with parking meters. And we were always considering a pay station kiosk. In discussions with parking staff, 30 minutes was what the business community wanted, and it was determined that having 30 minutes of paid parking would actually not benefit us economically. We pay fees to our vendors, and we pay fees for the credit card usage and a convenience fee for even the parking app, which for the half hour of paid parking would not, I think it was about 25 cents we'd get out of the dollar that it would cost. So it was determined by us and staff and parking that it would actually be better, more beneficial for us if we just allowed people to park for free on this block only for 30 minutes. And that would be Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., Friday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., Sunday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. We discussed it with parking enforcement, and frankly, enforcing 30-minute paid parking or 30-minute free parking is about the same from their viewpoint. So they are capable and willing to enforce the 30-minute free parking. So that is our current recommendation for the service lane. It also comes with the continued proposed parking regulations on down from Spring Street to Paul Robeson, Wiggins, which was in the original proposal. But again, instead of the 1 hour parking that we had recommended, the business community would like us to see this as 30-minute. This is metered parking. 30-minute metered parking is much easier to manage as a paid parking because people are using the parking meters. A lot of times still using coins, but sometimes the app. So our recommendation for this is that we maintain the metered parking spaces in this section. In order to make sure that we were accommodating all of the businesses and all of the delivery times that they had, in particular, there was at least one business that continues to get deliveries throughout the day. We did look at other opportunities for loading. One thing that we determined during our discussions with the Princeton Business Partnership was that, and in looking at all of the loading in the area, was that there is a parking space on Nassau Street in front of Hamilton Jewelers and Starbucks that should not be there. It is within a state-designated loading zone. As everybody knows, Nassau Street is State Route 27. A transportation order is placed by the commissioner on where loading zones can be, and it turned out that this parking space was within the designated loading zone. We spoke with the owner of Hamilton Jewelers and the rest of the business partnership and said we would like to remove that parking space and revert it back to its configuration as a loading zone. That is highlighted in blue on the screen. On the right-hand side of the screen, the box in blue. So we have converted that back to a loading zone. It is a 50-foot long loading zone, and it provides convenience for not only the stores on Nassau Street, but also some of the stores on that side of Witherspoon Street. In addition, there is currently a loading zone on Spring Street. It will not change. So we identified those in particular in our discussions with the business community to say that you have these other opportunities for loading during those times when the service lane would not be accessible for loading. They did request that we look at Tulane Yard as a potential spot for loading. We have investigated that. There are 2 metered parking spaces there currently that if we remove those 2 parking spaces, it would provide us with a 50-foot long area where loading could take place. I think at this point, engineering is willing to recommend that we do that. There is a handicap parking space and bike parking adjacent to this area that will remain in place and have sufficient space in their current configurations. I know that the Princeton, the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee was looking at potentially expanding that bicycle parking area, but there are other opportunities for more bicycle parking in other areas in order to accommodate this loading zone. We did take a look at one other location, and that location was the 2 metered parking spaces at the corner of Hullfish and Witherspoon Street in front of what you'll be familiar with as the Paper Source. This could have been converted to a loading zone. We don't recommend this because, number one, losing 2 metered parking spaces. Number 2 is most of the deliveries that come to this area of town come off Nassau Street. In order to use this as a loading zone, deliveries would have to come down Paul Robeson or Hullfish and then turn north on Witherspoon Street. And that's just not the way deliveries are made in this section of town. In addition, after loading or unloading, the truck would have to run down Spring Street, which just adds more truck traffic onto Spring Street, where there already is a loading zone. There already is loading happening. So we don't recommend that. We think that there's sufficient loading opportunities outside of the 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. loading service lane with Spring Street, Nassau Street, and Tulane Yard to accommodate all of the businesses. I will point out that this does change something that we haven't done before, and it extends the loading hours to 6 a.m. when currently they are 7 a.m. in most of the town. So that is something to consider if we go to a 6 a.m. Loading area. All of the businesses on this stretch of the roadway felt that 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. was sufficient for them, and again, they would work with their vendors to make sure that they stayed within that window as much as possible. And that is all I have. Any questions?
There will be. Michelle and then David.
So I just want to, first of all, thank Jim and Deanna in particular. Really worked hard on this and spent a lot of time. We had a couple of special meetings with the Princeton Business Partnership and the really all the businesses on the street, particular to deliveries. And as you know, a lot of these shops and restaurants don't have back doors. So the service is really important, that service lane. But everyone really came together and said, you know, who's more important, the vendors, the deliveries, or our patrons? And, you know, they really wanted to stick to the 10 a.m., but that's difficult. One store in particular doesn't even open, right, until after 10 and can't take deliveries until then. So I think it's a great compromise to look and have the loading zones, particularly on the Tulane Yard. If we can take those 2 spots out and have that as a loading zone, you're really taking the trucks off the street. And that brings that whole ambiance of the outdoor dining by 10 o'clock in the morning for lunch and dinners. You really aren't having these big trucks unloading and stopping and the exhaust from standing. So I think it's just a great compromise. and you've got a couple of spaces for them to still take their deliveries as you know, not everybody's going to be able to handle the 10 a.m. And the other thing that's come out of the conversations with the Princeton Business Partnership is that they want to start having garbage pickup at 6 a.m. They want the garbage trucks to come early, clean up the street, and not have trash out on the street. So I think that this is just a real movement towards some real great improvements. So, and I just thank you very much, the engineering team.
Thanks, Michelle. David?
Yeah, Jim, could you put back up the slide for the section of the road in front of the library? I just had a question. You don't list any metered spots on the east side of Witherspoon adjacent to Spring Street. I believe there are currently 2 metered spaces there. Are those anticipated to be removed or left in place?
I'm guessing that where my cursor is where you're speaking?
I can't see your
my
cursor.
Oh, okay. So between Spring and
Yeah, right across from the other 2 metered
Right.
spaces that are noted on the other side of Witherspoon.
They're too close to the intersection and the crosswalk that is number one at Spring Street, but also across at Whole Fish. So Title 39 requires 25 feet from a crosswalk. So that just doesn't work.
Okay, so they're currently non-compliant.
Yes. I'm not sure they're actually legal metered spaces. I'd have to measure it when I go out there.
Okay. And then, you know, I'll just comment on the Tulane Yard loading zone and just say, you know, for the benefit of the rest of council, I think that one of the reasons why PBAC was interested in expanding the bike parking there is that, you know, there are a lot of residences along this stretch of Witherspoon Street whose occupants are reliant on bicycles as their way to get around town. And so we've really been seeking for bike parking that could be actually covered because, you know, it's for bicycles that need to be parked overnight or even during the winter. That seems to be one location where that's possible. There, you know, that you could do some kind of a shed roof, you know, up against the building to cover bicycles in that location. So, you know, it may be that you can still get a loading space in there. I'm a little bit concerned about trucks hitting an overhang if we were to put some covered parking there. So I'd like to, you know, just put on the table. We do have the loading zones on Spring Street and on Nassau Street and hand trucks. And if we eliminated that, I also have concerns about that loading space. The exit from Tulane Yard is extremely narrow. And, you know, I'm nervous about trucks traversing through that way, and that's the only way to get out of Tulane Yard. So just some considerations on the downside of having that loading space there.
Thanks, David. Eve, I just want to jump in with a comment, and then you, and then Michelle.
I was just going to respond, to David real quick. I'm also interested in finding some covered bike parking, but that 2-lane yard is really important because it's central. So for the loading. And the other thing I was going to say is in terms of trucks, the garbage trucks can move into the 2-lane yard and out. So we know the sizes, and I've talked to the businesses that need that loading. And that was one of the big pieces that was the big caveat to saying 10 a.m. was okay. So I just want to consider that. And they can have the garbage trucks go through, so they wouldn't have any trucks larger than garbage trucks going through. And we could even sign it, I'm sure, in terms of the size. So, but yeah, they have talked about it.
Thanks, I hear that, but I would echo a concern about having a loading zone in the Tulane Yard for a couple reasons. one of which is exiting out onto Tulane, I think is a problem. But the other thing is, I think it actually encourages trucks to try to back out onto Witherspoon, which, you know, delivery truck drivers are going to try to take the easiest route they can. So I don't know necessarily, and depending on what's happening in that lot at any point in time, it might be extremely difficult for them to go out the right way. So personally, my gut screams at me that that's not the best idea out of all the other great, excellent ideas that have been proposed here so far. Anyway, Eve, you were up next.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions that I planned to ask about, but I hadn't picked up on the loading change from 7 a.m. to 6 a.m., so thank you for that. I would like to know if any outreach has been done to the people who live on Witherspoon Street to discuss this change, because as Jim knows, I'm already getting complaints from somebody about trucks and garbage trucks coming through before 7 a.m. So I understand the business community is an important constituent, but the residents that live there are also important constituents, and this is a pretty major change that I'm concerned that, you know, they get a chance to weigh in and to know about it before it goes into effect. So has any outreach or anything been done?
I can answer that. The Princeton Business Partnership intends to discuss this with all the property owners. They're all commercial property owners. They're all part of the PBP, and so the tenants are their tenants, and so they've committed to speaking with them and working with them to you know, to discuss this, because things like garbage pickup, power washing, keeping the CBD clean, you can't have it both ways, right? If you want to have it clean and taken care of early. So they are committed to doing that, and so there's a whole committee now that's focusing on doing this. So, so that's, you know, the ball's in their court, so to speak.
Okay, well that's good to hear. I guess I'm a little reluctant to move forward on that change without hearing more, you know, without hearing from the residents a little bit more. So I hope that that can be done expeditiously, and that the property owners really commit to talking to all the residents, that it's a case where information really does get passed on. I have a couple of other questions. One is about, we're removing a lot of parking. Some of it is for good reasons. For example, the space on Nassau Street that really shouldn't be there because, you know, it's a loading zone. But I'm wondering if, are we keeping track of the decrease in our parking revenues that some of these changes will lead to? And I'm also, I don't know, a little, it's going to be an odd thing where the parking spaces at the, you know, the southern end of Nassau Street are going to be completely free, but then as you go, you know, a block further down or a half block further down, those parking spaces are going to be metered. I'm wondering how that will work, and I also would like to kind of hold in reserve the idea of changing you know, that parking to you know, longer term, depending on how things work out. So I don't know if that's a question so much as a comment, but one, you know, about have we taken into account the cost of these changes of providing the free parking, because parking is an important revenue to the municipality, and especially it's a revenue that is often paid by people who don't live in Princeton as opposed to Princetonians. So it's always nice to kind of distribute the cost of having a vibrant downtown to those who use it, as well as the residents. And the other about kind of the idiosyncrasy of the, you know, pay on one side, pay if you go right and free if you go left, or the opposite. So
The first question is, yes, we do keep track of the revenue lost as we eliminate parking spaces. Wes does a tremendous job keeping track of all of our revenue, and we are monitoring that. We also plan to monitor this idea of 30 minutes free parking in this area, and we're going to rely on the businesses themselves to do some self-policing and make sure that their patrons are paying attention in addition to our parking enforcement. If it doesn't work, we plan to move to pay parking. And at that time, we'll probably come back to council and ask that it be a longer period of time, partly because of the revenue, the minimal amount of revenue that's made on a 30-minute parking situation. We would probably come back and recommend an hour.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Yeah, Leticia.
So I just have a quick question. I understand how 30-minute meter parking would be enforced, but I wonder how the limits on 30 minutes free parking would be enforced.
Well, currently we have some areas in the municipality where there is a limited amount of free parking time, and our parking enforcement rides around, notes down the vehicles that are parked there. There's nothing to keep them from writing down a license plate number and then coming back near the end of that period to see if the vehicle is still parked there. That is what they would plan to do. They can also take a photograph of the vehicle, come back half an hour later or a little bit more than half an hour later and see if that vehicle's still there. And they'll have photographic evidence that the vehicle has been there for more than 30 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Just, you guys will coordinate with the Princeton Business Partnership as far as making sure they get a notice to the residents in their buildings in time before there's any sort of ordinance introduction and stuff like that, so council's aware that it
Absolutely.
actually happened in a timely manner?
Yes, we will.
Thanks. Okay, nothing else on that one? Thank you very much for that presentation. And now another very easy one, Witherspoon Jackson and Tree Street residential permits, updates again since the September 12th meeting. Deanna?
Good evening. I hope it doesn't feel like Groundhog Day since both Jim and I were here at the last meeting to discuss both of these topics. But we wanted to come back on the Witherspoon Jackson and Tree Street permit program because one, we received so many comments from council and the public as a part of last work session, but also as staff was going through the comments and trying to formulate potential regulations to address the comments. Just more ideas were popping up and other things. So tonight, again, we're talking about the residential permits for Witherspoon Jackson and the Tree Streets, the guest permit program for both of those neighborhoods, and proposed implementation schedule. So if you recall, a lot of the comments focused on guest permits as to how we had proposed that at the work session, the cost of the program and what that would translate into as cost of permits to the residents. Technology, both in terms of for permitting and enforcement. There were comments about the Hamilton corridor being included as part of the Tree Street area. And as well, there was also discussion about business parking because what is being proposed is exclusively a residential permit parking program that allows for 3-hour unpermitted parking, but there's no special designation or assistance in the program for business parking. So there were a lot of different topics that came up that required some attention, and while we don't have all of the answers yet, we wanted to at least give you more feedback and information on where we're at now. We actually reconvened our parking group on the 19th, so a week after the meeting, to discuss all of the topics. So I've updated the slides. Some of these slides are from the September 12th meeting to show in green what we came up with as modifications to what we presented last time. So one of the first modifications was in relation to the enforcement period of the unpermitted parking. Previously, it was proposed for that 3-hour time limit and the enforcement period to extend until 11 p.m. We've dialed that back to 8 p.m. So in essence, if you were visiting a downtown area, downtown business, if you arrived before, or around 5:30, then you would be able to stay in park until, midnight if you wanted to. There was no restriction. That 3-hour time limit goes away. And then the same on Sunday. Sunday had also been an 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. enforcement period. We ratcheted that back to be similar or the same as the pay parking in the downtown area, which is the 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. So that kind of standardized the enforcement with what is being currently performed by the enforcement officers. So that was one change. In terms of the costs, you'll notice that I've gone through and I've edited out the costs of the permit program at this point. Staff are meeting on Friday this week to look at some estimates that have been put together as part of the permit parking task force, and to compare that to what we're proposing to come up with a program cost. And then we'll be able to come back with some estimated costs of permits based on that information. In addition, we looked at how to handle this second permit, because if you recall when we had presented it previously, the idea is that if the dwelling unit does not have a driveway or off-street parking, they would be eligible for a permit. And then we discussed that there could be a guest permit available if somebody had a second car. But because of the conversation with the guest permits, that we didn't want to have, a 1-month permit, we wanted more options. The thinking is that we would look at providing a second permit to those residences that really don't have the off-street parking, and we would look to increase the rate at such a rate that it's significantly higher. And so I have shown on the slide from the Nelson Nygaard study how they showed the delineation of costs. In that case, they showed without off-street parking, say $30 a year for the first permit. The second permit would be $30 a quarter, so 4 times higher. So that's the thinking as we're looking at the program costs and how we would levy it in the future. But until we see what the program costs are, we don't have those figures to give you. Looking more at the details and the statistics of the different neighborhoods was another piece of work that we took at this time, just to make it more clear to everybody. So in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, there's 238 on-street parking spaces. We have estimated that the number of dwelling units that are in need of an on-street parking permit are 83. So that leaves 155 parking spaces that could be available for the 3-hour parking, potentially the second vehicle permit and guest permits. So we'll be doing further work on that to determine if we need to specify kind of threshold quantities for those different permits, for the second permit and the guest permits. But we'll be working through that with the committee. And I also wanted just to note, there is off-street parking for free at the CP South lot. So even if we don't have the accommodations, say necessarily on the street in these zones, this is already something that is existing and would continue with the program. We also have the McLean lot, and we'd be working with the clerk's office as to how the permits may or may not change with the implementation of this program. And so in that same vein, with the tree streets, there is also off-street parking available at Park Place. It's not free, obviously, but there is that release valve for them, as well as some of the university lots for the weekends. So we wanted to make sure that we're trying to cover as many of the demographic conditions that we can by providing the off-street, the on-street, paid, not paid. The tree streets has less need for on-street permits just because there's fewer properties that lack the off-street parking. With our numbers, we're at about 15 dwelling units for 183 on-street parking spaces. So this is an area where we may have more flexibility, potentially in, maybe there is consideration of allowing some business permits or something. So that's going to be an ongoing discussion with staff, and we just wanted to test the water, so to speak, as to if there is support for considering that in the tree streets as an option, if we can strike the right balance. Yes? Okay. Thank you, Eve.
Thank you. Leticia?
Thank you, Deanna. Really great. Thank you for taking our comments into consideration from the first presentation, and really I think this is great progress on that. I do have a question. It was presented at the first work session, and I know discussed about the overnight parking in general. Yes. As we all know that during COVID, overnight parking has not been enforced, and I know that at least the permit parking task force had considered whether it was possible for that to be lifted. That though we know now that, and I think we understood that it would be an issue for certain neighborhoods, including the Tree Streets and Witherspoon Jackson, where off-street parking is limited, that it would be an issue for the residents, and that has proven true, especially in the Tree Streets, that when we're not enforcing it, it does impact the residents of those neighborhoods. And I also understand that the high school permit parking is for future consideration, but if we're going to be going back to enforcing overnight parking, it is going to impact residents who are having, whether it's a student or someone that lives there that doesn't have a space on the driveway to be able to park overnight, and would actually, from what I understand, would actually be willing to pay to be able to park overnight. From what we've heard, as far as the lifting of the overnight parking enforcement, the most issues have been in the Tree Streets. As far as I know, there have been no issues in the high school or other neighborhoods where residents have been parking on the street to date while it's not being enforced. And I wonder what the downside would be to allow for permits, paid permits, in areas where there's abundant parking off-street if residents were willing to pay for it, and where in fact it could be a source of revenue that we don't have now.
We'll take that question back to the committee. I have some answers in my head, but I'd rather go through with the committee and make sure that that it's a well thought out response. But if you wouldn't mind, I'll finish the last few slides that we have, and then I can take more questions.
Okay.
Okay. So, so I covered the tree streets. In terms of the guest permit program, rather than the 1 month permit that we had initially recommended, we went back and are looking at offering 1 day, 3 day, 7 day, 1 month permits, potentially with a cap. That's still an ongoing discussion. I think Jim and I just had a discussion of why do we need to cap it. So we'll be working with the committee more on that. These permits will require documentation both of the property ownership and tying the vehicle registration to the property, whether it's by the actual address on the registration or some sort of a notarized document. That's the current methodology that we use for the permits in Princeton, and that would continue with these guest permits. And rather than trying to lump in the in-home care permits and the contractor permits, we're going to separate those out. The contractor permits is something where we could actually cover it with our right-of-way occupation permit if they want to utilize a space for a series of days. You know, we allow it for, say, a dumpster. Well, it can also be the same as their vehicle. So that's one idea we have in covering that piece of it. The in-home care permits, I think we only have 2 on record right now. So we may not need to build an entire program to satisfy that need, but we will have to have a policy in place. So we'll be working in the future on that piece of it. And then in terms of the implementation and going to Leticia's comments about enforcement, and that's also why I pointed out that we do have those off-street parking lots that are fairly close to these neighborhoods, currently existing and available for parking, that if we do want to start educating the residents in those neighborhoods that the program is coming, and we begin a process of enforcement, that we look to do that in November. You know, that way we can do the education first, give them time to adapt. The idea is that when we start enforcing, people should come in and apply for the permits that are currently available. You know, that program still exists for the on-street parking. And utilize that program. We could waive the fees to make it palatable, because this is something that hasn't really been enforced for 2 years. And then if they are ineligible to receive that on-street parking permit, they'd have to look to those other options, whether it's CP South, Park Place, you know, Spring Street Garage for that matter. So that's one thing that our internal committee has talked about, that there needs to be enforcement action starting up soon so that we can start getting compliance. And it will also raise awareness that that this is a program in Princeton that needs their attention. And then again, the future topics, as we've noted, looking at the budget for the permit parking program, continuing the discussion on the guest permits, high school residential permits, and then those areas that are loosely defined by the former borough as to how we want to handle whether there's overnight parking prohibition or allowance in those areas, and that we'll continue with our meeting schedule and tackle those early in 2023. And that's
Okay,
it.
thank you. I know David and Eve.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to make a really specific comment about the number of eligible residences in the tree streets. Just the counts that I had done on behalf of the Permit Parking Task Force were a little bit higher. Right within the tree streets, I think about a total of 18 or 20. But in addition to that, and I've mentioned this before, there are a few residences on Park Ave, which currently, park overnight in the CVS lot, but use the free daytime parking for their cars in the Tree Streets neighborhood. And I do think it's appropriate to include them in the zone, as they're very close to the Tree Streets. I think if they don't have off-street parking, there's no reason to exclude them from eligibility for permits in that zone. So that was the specific thing that I wanted to mention. And then, I'm glad to hear that there is still some consideration being given possibly to business-related or, permits in the Tree Streets. As you say, there are a lot less need for those spaces amongst the residences there. And, I just want to make a little bit of a pitch on principle that the folks who work in these businesses really are essential workers for us. They really make the town go. Many of their jobs, they're on their feet, 8 hours a day. So I hear people arguing, we ask our school kids to walk a mile to school and a mile back. Why can't we ask these employees to do that? But the reality is that kids sit on their rear end most of the day in school. So there's a real hardship, for some of those employees to have to walk as far as the Westminster lot. And in addition, I just have concerns that the Westminster lot is not going to be available long-term. And if we put in place a system that is predicated on the notion that no commercial parking can be allowed on residential streets, and then we lose the Westminster lot, we are really going to have a hard time clawing back the notion that some commercial parking can happen on those streets. So and the Permit Parking Task Force really wrestled with this and came to the same conclusion that, the ideal is to limit the business use in such a way that residents really can enjoy more flexible parking on their own streets, but not to eliminate it altogether. And I think the result, if you eliminate it altogether, is that you're going to have a lot of empty parking spaces on those streets, and you're going to have these poor employees, walking 3/4 of a mile or whatever to get to their car and feeling like, why is the town punishing me in this way when there are all these available parking spaces that I'm walking right past to get to my car? So,
Thanks, David. Even then, Leighton.
I have a number of comments, but I'll pick up on David's point, which is one of my major points as well. I felt like the package of recommendations that the Parking Task Force came up with had, a spoonful of sugar to go with the medicine. It really opened up options for people who were really struggling, who had no parking or only one parking space, as we've done here. But then we've removed the kind of, impetus to encourage people to share the streets, which I think is also really important. That, I have no problem with residents taking priority, although this is a very big financial contribution to people who own these units, because now they will have, inexpensive on-street parking that will affect the resale value of their homes as opposed to no on-street parking. So I think in exchange for that, which not everybody in the neighborhood will benefit from, but and the other limitations that are being put in, 3-hour parking to prevent the streets from being taken up with other cars, for much of the day, and offer more available parking for residents with permits. I'm really uncomfortable with not considering employees, especially in the tree streets, because in Witherspoon Jackson there are 2, maybe 3 options, if you include the Spring Street garage, that are reasonably affordable or free. But I think those options in the tree streets are more limited. And so, I do really have a concern about that. And so, I don't necessarily want to hold everything up, but I guess I'd urge maybe to think about maybe making this part 1 with part 2 coming, that just for people to be on notice, and also to really present this as a pilot. We're doing this, we're going to see what happens after 6 months. This is not set in stone. We reserve the right to make changes, just to give people a heads up that this is, this is not the final version, and what you have now may be great, but we can't promise you're going to keep it, because we do need to, meet the needs of various constituents. And then I have a very specific, 2 specific points. One is Jugtown is left out of this, and I know that many people there spoke at the permit parking meetings about the need to reinstitute no overnight parking because of the concern that university students in particular are using those lots. So I wonder if we're going to do, to reimpose overnight parking, if maybe Jugtown might be included in that first batch rather than later on. And I have to say, I do object to the terminology on the last slide about, even though you characterized it as sort of the former borough, but I think we really need to look at the different areas and make judgments about whether they need parking restrictions or not, without paying too much heed to, former boroughs, because I called up a map of the former borough and I was looking at some of it. It's just, it cuts through all these streets, and, I think let's, I think we all need to try to let go of that and, really just look at the needs on the ground, which is exactly what you're doing in Witherspoon Jackson, and the tree streets is looking at it as a neighborhood that crosses those boundaries. So just in terms of assessing the other need for imposing overnight parking or other parking regulations to not kind of be bound by that former borough, former township. Going back to the schedule, when would parking tickets that one would have to pay rather than warnings be issued? Would that not be until January, or?
We're currently recommending November.
Okay, so I'm concerned about that because the holiday season, November, December is a really big deal for our restaurants in both those sections of town, and I'm concerned not only for employees but also visitors may be affected by that. So I, wonder if we could maybe have, a warning system with revenue collection starting in January rather than in November, and I'll maybe defer to Michelle on this for her, because we all remember the Metergate situation when that came in, right before the holiday season, and since so much of what merchants, and I don't know enough about restaurants to speak, but I assume that the last couple of months of the year are very important, so I wouldn't want to do anything that would, damage their holiday season. So that's just something to maybe look into and assess whether what the schedule should be. So, but I just want to thank you both and everyone else, Justin, other people who've spent a lot of time on this, capping off the 3 years that several council members spent. So I wouldn't say it's totally a thankless task. I am thanking you for it, but it's pretty much a thankless task. So thank you really to all who have been involved in this.
You're welcome. And just for clarification, what we're looking to enforce is the no parking 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. So that, to me, that is more affecting the residential
Right.
properties.
Okay, that's
than the
no problem with
businesses.
that. Okay, sorry, didn't understand.
Okay, thanks, Eve. Leighton was next, and then Michelle.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for a job well done, team. Just one comment on the guest permits being made available. I get a 1 day and a 3 day, but a 7 day and a 1 month, I think, is fraught with misuse and abuse. And I would hate to see us make all these changes to mitigate parking in 2 neighborhoods only to give it away to people who would misuse it and put a dent in the things that we're trying to do on a positive basis. I would think long and hard about 7 days and 1 month. That's a sabbatical. That's a vacation. Anybody that's coming to visit you that's going to stay for 7 days and 1 month should find their own parking.
Thanks, Leighton. Michelle.
Thanks. And again, this is such a complex, difficult, hot potato. So I really appreciate all the work that's been done. And I continue to grapple too with how I feel about some of the recommendations, but I do tend to not support the residential permits that could be purchased if they have off-street parking. I would tend to really support the guest passes, the day passes, but I think we're going to need that awful LPR technology word, because I don't know how the online permitting could take place without it. So I think we need to quickly, and I know we've had some discussions with our attorney about this, to figure out how to address the concerns of the residents about LPR technology and how we can safeguard that information. But I don't see how we can do this without having that kind of online permitting where it would be instantaneous, where you could buy 1, 2, 3, 1 week pass or whatever it might be. But I'm really concerned, and I am really glad to hear, that there's, support for the employees to park on the street. I think there needs to be a balance. But I'm concerned about parking up the street with residents that already have off-street parking. So I'm really not sure how to balance that. I kind of grapple with that. So I commend you for taking this on. And I do want to say that I know that the Princeton Business Partnership would like to help grapple with the employee parking situation. I know there's underutilized meters, there's surface lots, and then this issue of, if you did do on-street parking, how many permits you would have in each zone, and how that would be distributed, and how that would be promoted, so that it's equitable and fair to the businesses. So that's a big task, but that is something that we will work together on. So, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, Mia?
I just want to echo what you've said about the piloting. You know, I think we're definitely making progress. Thank you. You know, but I remain very concerned about setting precedents. And of course, there are knowns and unknown knowns, and I won't mention who said that, but I think we'll learn a lot in the implementation, and we'll want to modify things. And I'm very leery about raising expectations that anything is you know, going to be permanent. So, you know, we should look at this as sort of a trial and error.
Leticia.
Just one last comment. Unless I'm mistaken, I think there's only 2 of us who have limitations on overnight parking in front of our homes. I think. You have limitations on overnight parking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about who was not trying to touch the former borough and the former, but just making the comment that for those who do experience the frustration of not being able to park in front of our homes when there's plenty of space, I understand where it's an issue in certain neighborhoods, but when it's not an issue as far as if it's permitted, if residents would be able through permit to be able to park in front of their homes, I just don't understand what the downside would be of allowing that.
Okay. All right, so, I'm sorry. Oh, come on.
One tiny comment, I'm so sorry. So I think when you're talking about Witherspoon Jackson, you pointed out the cleaning schedule, the street, and you didn't do that with the tree streets, but I assume they also have a cleaning schedule so that will be sorted out in whatever the signage is.
Yes, I did note it on the slide. I did not mention it in the presentation. We would be looking 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. first or third Mondays. That's the
You don't want
the
to do
current
overnight
schedule with
parking?
DPW.
You don't want to do alternate side of the street parking?
Princeton does not have that in regulations. Like,
That
for
is-
example, we have the existing regulation in Witherspoon Street. I think, or I'm sorry, for the Witherspoon Jackson, I think in that case, the expectation is people leave to go to their jobs in that time, or they would move a car to the
Another
community
street.
parking lot for that amount of time. But if there is a need, you know, as Mia and Leticia have said, this is a pilot program. You know, we are looking, and you've said we'll review it, and that could be a future modification.
Okay.
I'll just comment, since the residential permits are viewed as being by zone, you know, if you do the street sweeping on certain streets on certain days and other streets on other days, it essentially could be like the alternate side of the street rules in New York.
Yeah, and that's how Witherspoon Jackson is handled now. Certain streets are on the, where is it? I don't even see it now. But it is already handled over there, where it's certain streets on one day and other streets on the other day.
Okay. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, that's where I was going next. So is there anyone from the public in this room that wants to come on up, just state your name and address and watch the timer? Thank you.
Franz, good to see you. Princeton Avenue. First, I want to say it's good that the tree streets and everyone is getting relief. I communicated some comments to Ms. Stockton earlier. I'll just bring it up. I think one of the issues, and I think by Ms. Niedergang saying it's a pilot, it's a good thing. Just want to point out, we're talking about existing construction. There's also future development. You do not want to create an incentive for somebody to destroy a driveway, build a bigger unit, updevelop, if they automatically then get access to 2 parking spots. So I think one of the things that need to be done, maybe not in a pilot, is how does this get managed going forward? We don't want to create more affordability issues. So doesn't need to be addressed at this point. I just thought I'd bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point.
Thanks. All right, Adam, let's see if we have people on Zoom that, yep. Okay. Kathleen, can you unmute yourself? There you go. Kathleen?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you could just say your name and address, that'd be great.
Okay. My name is Kathleen Carroll. I live at 167 John Street. Of course, this discussion is near and dear to my heart. Just to follow on a couple things that were just said, I don't think you know when street cleaning takes place in Witherspoon Jackson because people are not gone for work yet. Public Works comes through at 5 a.m. and wakes us all up. And they haven't done that on a Wednesday in a very long time. They come whatever day is convenient for them. So, and I think you give us too much credit if you think we know that we can go park on another street on the day that we have street cleaning, because I didn't know that that the other streets had different days. I thought the whole neighborhood was the same day. And Leticia seems to think that there haven't been any problems from the lack of parking enforcement in Witherspoon Jackson, but street cleaning is one of the problems that we've had. People are parking overnight. They're not gone on when the Public Works comes through. They're not gone when the posted day is. They're there all night. They don't get ticketed, so they come back every night. They're always there. Okay, so now on to the proposals. I think the most important thing is that residents should have the option of buying permits for the municipal lot rather than on street or for both, because, you know, if you go away for a week, what are you supposed to do with your car? If you're, you know, or street cleaning. I don't think there definitely isn't room at Community Park for all 83 people eligible for permits to move their cars down there on street cleaning days. So I don't think you're being realistic about that. Again, on enforcement, you know, it's been painfully obvious to me that a lot of people are parking without paying for permits, and I feel like I'm due a refund for the last 2 years because I did pay for a permit and everybody else is parking without a permit. So I don't even know if these people are eligible for permits and just don't bother, or if they're from out of town. I don't know what's going on. I have seen cars in the McLean Street lot from Virginia, from Pennsylvania, from New York, from, you know, wherever, and not just one night. I'm talking about people who've been there a lot. Now it's tapered off recently. I know they must have gone through and ticketed cars a couple of weeks ago because there's fewer, but I still see 3 or 4 cars every night without a permit parking McLean Street lot.
Kathleen, can you?
Is that time?
Yeah, the time's up, but if you could just wrap up. I think stickers or hang tags combined with electronic systems might work better for guest parking, so that somebody can tell if somebody has a right to be there. Otherwise, it's all on the police, and from what I could see, they're not really doing a very good job of enforcement. So they could use help from the neighbors. Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Adam, who's next on the? Okay, Elena?
Hi, thank you for giving me opportunity to speak. I live on Tree Street. I live on Pine Street. It's a short one-way street.
Yeah.
And we are
Elena,
very
could you
fortunate
just give your full name and address?
my name is Elena Sokol. I live at 34 Pine Street.
Thanks.
And I'm here to express my support for giving some of the residents opportunity to park on the street. I don't need it. We have offline parking, but I know my residents, my neighbors often like have to find parking and they walk for like more than half an hour because they don't have any driveway. But I would like to actually urge and support David Cohen's comments about employers. I don't think they're just employers, they're also members of these neighborhoods. And we're fortunate to have a coffee shop, a restaurant, a little grocery store. That's where a lot of life in our neighborhood happen. And I think these people often don't live here or don't walk into their work because they cannot afford. If we speak about diversity and inclusion, we should think about it not just in terms of who are the residents, where they get affordable units, but whether the people who service us and serve to us and make our life more pleasurable are also part of that diversity and inclusion. And I think a lot of people in the restaurant business, in particular, the waitresses, are young women and they stay there until 11 p.m. And asking them to work for extra 20, 30 minutes after 10 p.m. at nights is not necessarily good attitudes in terms of encouraging the diverse young workforce to be there for us. So in that sense, I don't think it should be a pilot 6 months later thought. I would urge people to include employers and members of these neighborhoods into consideration to begin with and consider how to accommodate them. They don't need to have the same type of permits as residents, but hopefully they could have a permits which allow them not to have a worse work condition essentially or pay more for the parking paid places. And I think Princeton can afford it because that's what makes life in Princeton special. We're not a sleepy community. And I think it's not just, with our restaurants and coffee shop, not just help us, like people drive to our neighborhoods to have coffee here. So, and I hope it's something that could be prioritized in terms of considerations on a shorter time scale. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jack, you're up.
Thank you, guys. Well, this has been.
Jack, if you could just say your name and.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Jack Morrison. 256 Nassau Street is my home away from home. Nassau Street Seafood and Blue Point Grill. The Tree Street neighborhood is, as the last guest just said, is unique to our community with its diversity of services. We have a hair salon, dry cleaner, post office, bank, bike shop, plumber, Tiger Labs, a convenience store, coffee shop, multiple liquor stores, gas stations, a bar, restaurants, and takeout. Employee and customer proximity parking is essential in operating our businesses. Residents choose to live here for its vibrancy and convenience. The commercial properties and their tenants pay a substantial amount of real estate taxes and do not require any services other than police and fire safety. We take care of our trash, don't send any children to our schools, and I am sure this helps at budget time. Council has shown a commitment to a walkable, bikeable, sustainable community, and we question a plan that encourages residents to get another car. I speak for our neighborhood businesses that we do not support the Westminster lot as the default. Understanding now that the Westminster property has multiple offers, this would only be a temporary solution at best. We are not trying to derail this process. As you may know, I was on the permit parking task force, and I'm strongly in support of permitting both employees and residents that are in need. And I think, at least in the Tree Streets, we would clear out one of the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that's the university students. I honestly think that we could probably run a 6 months with a permit program and take a look and just see what kind of oxygen we have down there. I believe I concur with Deanna and the council members that we do have parking spaces down there. With all due respect, and I appreciate Deanna saying that she's going to, there were a lot of TBDs in this presentation tonight, and we all really appreciate to get a more finite plan that has clarity with numbers and locations so employees and employers can operate in the near and long term and base our future decisions on the viability of the plan. How about that? 2.5 minutes, Marco.
Very good, Jack. You're the
Not
man.
bad, huh? I practiced. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jack. Anyone else out there in the Zoom world wants to put their hand up? Okay, great. Any last comments or questions? If not, okay, tremendous. Thank you, Deanna and Jim, for the 2 presentations. All right, we're moving on to a public hearing for ordinance 2022-32, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton establishing 1 hour free parking in the Spring Street Municipal Parking Garage 7 days per week and free parking on certain holidays during the Witherspoon Street Improvements Phase 1. Is there a motion on that? David, thank you. Eve's got the second. So we'll start with council questions and comments and then go to the public. Michelle?
Thank you. I just want to, again, thank the engineering team, Deanna and Jim, for helping work through this. It's really an essential component of helping move traffic off the street during this congested time with all the construction downtown, and it's something that we're able to do because we own the Spring Street Garage, so giving an hour free parking is really a nice way to help the business community as much as we can. And I also think it can help change behavior and get our patrons who are trying to find the perfect parking spot in front of their destination to start utilizing the parking deck. So I thank you very much for doing this.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Public.
Oh, the public hearing. Didn't do the public. The most important part of the public hearing. Anybody in this room that wants to talk to this? See none? Okay. Adam, we have a hand up. Thanks. Dorothea?
Hi there. Is it okay? I had submitted a request to speak to the previous issue. Is that still okay, or have we moved on?
Well, we'll come back to you in just a minute. Let me just finish the public hearing since we already started it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll come right back to you.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anybody out in the Zoom world that wants to talk on the ordinance, the public hearing for the free parking in the garage? Okay. Now seeing no hands, we'll go to the roll call vote.
Ms. Perrone-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Mr. Newland?
Yes.
Okay. Adam, can we bring Dorothea back so she can make her comment on the previous presentations?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you for giving it an extra little moment. I don't know what happened to my request. It looked like it had gone through. My name is Dorothea von Moltke, and I live at 119 Linwood Circle. I did want to mention quickly that I also wasn't aware that written comments aren't being read into the record, and your website portal still says that anything submitted in time would be read. I know several people who were still under the impression that this is a way to be heard, and including on the parking issue before council tonight. So at any rate, my husband, my brother-in-law, and I own Labyrinth Books, and we've been residents in Princeton for 15 years. As some of you, or maybe all of you know, the parking topic is one I care about a great deal. So I wrote some thoughts down. It's difficult to convey the degree to which the fact that the current parking plan makes no meaningful provisions for employee parking, should it be adopted in its current form, makes me pessimistic about doing business in Princeton and dispirited about living in a town in which classism is apparently such an operative force. I fear that the fact that the proposal council is now asked to consider is where we're at is a testament to a mix of good intentions gone awry and an absence of political will in balancing the needs of all who require parking in Princeton and distributing any burdens resulting from this equitably across all parts of town, which the plan that had been put forth by the town's own parking task force after I think 3 years of work had done, and had done it well. I really appreciated David's, Eve's, Michelle's, and also the neighbors' comments who spoke earlier in favor of reopening greater consideration for employees, and I urge you all to take those comments very seriously. So concretely, the current proposal eliminates practically all unmetered parking and reasonable walking distance to the downtown. To the extent that the Westminster lot is central to the town's answer to this dilemma, I can only say that I think that of the 10 or so permits issued there, 9 were ones Labyrinth bought for employees, all of whom tried to make this work for 3 months when those first became available, and only 3 of whom are still trying to make a go of it, despite the fact that it adds half an hour to 40 minutes to their daily commuting time. The employees who've been trying this come from as far as Edison, New Brunswick, and Pennsylvania, and they have families, concert gigs, and other crucial commitments to get to at the end of the day. They've tried, and it just doesn't work. I have others on staff who have physical impediments that make this distance untenable, so they never signed up for a permit. To say nothing of the fact that, as I think Jack mentioned, the lot is likely soon to be sold. And then what? Every employee you ask will tell you what a difficult time this is for hiring, and parking comes up in all our interviews with prospective employees. We're dealing with the effects of inflation, supply chain disruptions, the mental exhaustion of our staff, coming sort of out of a pandemic into a world teetering in so many other ways, among other stiff headwinds. The added burden and prospect of years of construction in town, which has done much to worsen the parking situation and our general working conditions, is doing its part in creating a climate in which continuing to do business in Princeton is exceptionally challenging.
Dorothea?
I'm almost done. I'm
Okay.
asking council to do right by the workers who serve Princeton every day and by the businesses that are trying to preserve the uniqueness of this town's character. What you see on a sunny Saturday when town is bustling doesn't tell you what you need to know about how we as small businesses are doing. Please act as stewards of a downtown struggling to retain its vibrancy. Parking is probably the most important and certainly the most immediate issue where you can make a difference in this regard. And until and unless affordable housing becomes readily available in Princeton, more employee parking
Dorothea.
options in particular are necessary.
Thank you.
you for taking this seriously and for adding time so
All
that
right,
I could
thanks.
say these.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, we're going to jump to the ordinance introductions. We have 2 to introduce tonight. Ordinance 2022-33, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton establishing a residential parking district on Bank Street and amending the code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1964. Public hearing on October 10th, 2022. Is there a motion? David, thank you. Is there a second? Leticia, thank you. Roll call vote?
Ms. Perrone-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
No.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Mr. Newland?
Yes.
Okay. Ordinance 2022-34, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating public parking spaces for charging of electric vehicles and amending Chapter 19 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and Chapter 11 of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Public hearing, October 10th, 2022. Is there a motion? Leighton, thank you. Is there a second? Leticia, thank you. Roll call vote?
Ms. Perrone-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Mr. Newland?
Yes.
Okay. Resolutions. 22-342, resolution of the mayor and council of Princeton authorizing extension of grace period for payment of third quarter 2022 taxes. Is there a motion? Wow, okay, sorry. All the hands went up so quick. Michelle, you're going to grab you for that, and Eve, I'm going to grab you for the second, if that's okay. Any?
I'm
You can't-
sorry, who did you say?
What happened?
Okay, Michelle's got the motion, and then David, you had your hand up too, right?
I did.
David's got the second. Sorry, there were too many hands going up at the same time. I just couldn't. You guys are all too quick. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Questions, comments on the resolution? Eve?
I'd just like to see a little better, and Bernie, you spoke a little bit about this earlier in the evening about what, why there's a change in how taxes are paid. And I don't think I've seen something in the municipal newsletter explaining that particular point. And I wonder if you or Sandy or someone could just, the point that you brought up earlier about why this has changed, if that can be written up in a succinct fashion, and then, you know, those of us who are on Nextdoor, Facebook can also use that. I would appreciate that. So that's just my comment on that.
Will do.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 22-343, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton awarding a professional engineering services agreement to Whitman in connection with soil management and disposal at 298 River Road in the not-to-exceed amount of $1,448,610. And John is...
Available on Zoom.
I'm here. My video is turned off, looks like, because the host, I have a message, the host stopped it. So here we go. There we go. Can you see me?
I don't
On
know
the
that
screen?
we can. Oh, there you go.
Yep, there he is.
There, here we are. Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is John Scagnelli. I'm an environmental attorney and a partner of the firm of Skoritsky Hollenbeck. And I was asked to speak to you this evening in support of this resolution. What I'd like to do is to provide you with some context and to give you a very brief background. I know it's getting late in the evening, but this relates to the 298 River Road site. And just to kind of go back with some history.
John, could you maybe pause for a second? I think we need the volume turned up. It's very hard to hear you. Is
that true? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was what
Okay, should be better now.
we were just doing.
All right, that's at your end. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. Well, I just wanted to give you some background relating to the 298 River Road site, what happened there, to put this resolution in context for you. Back in June of 2019, the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection inspected the site, and they discovered illegal dumping and disposal of construction materials and fill. And at that point, the DEP issued a notice of violation to the municipality relating to the illegal dumping and disposal, and they directed that the materials dumped there be removed and the site be remediated. That followed with a month later with the DEP administrative order issued to the borough with a proposed $35,000 administrative penalty. The borough, through Ms. Cecil, your town attorney, filed an administrative appeal of the order and requested an administrative hearing, and that proceeding is still pending. Then after that, in November, the DEP, Bureau of Solid Waste Compliance and Enforcement, sent a letter, a directive letter, we call it, to the municipality, directing very specific steps that needed to be undertaken to remove the disposed of material and to remediate the site. And at that point, the municipality hired the Whitman companies as its environmental consultant to review the site and to respond to what DEP had directed. So we're basically involved, this basically involves a DEP-directed remediation cleanup of this site. Whitman started to do work after this in 2019, 2020, and 2021. The first thing they did was to sample the dumped material and conduct ecological investigations. They did that during that period of time. And then as of December of 2021, Whitman filed a corrective action plan to the DEP. Now, the corrective action plan was directed in the directive letter that the municipality had received. And in the corrective action plan, there was a remedial action work plan calling for the removal of 24,000 tons of the fill soils dumped there by excavation and direct truck loadout for off-site disposal. So the corrective action plan referenced the removal of the soils and stated that the soils would be transported to the Harleyville Materials disposal facility in Lower Salford Township in Pennsylvania for beneficial reuse. In addition to the pile soils, there were 3 areas of impacted soils by metals, which are referred to in the corrective action plan as hotspots. And those areas as referenced in the remedial action work plan, were to be staged on site into one pile for disposal, and the estimated volume of that pile was about 700 tons of material. The disposal location was Pure Soil in Jackson, New Jersey. And finally, after the disposal, there's a need for post-excavation sampling of the areas that underlay the contaminated soil area, the illegally disposed of fill soil areas, and there'll also be a need to cap the excavated areas with a foot of clean topsoil and to reseed. In addition, Whitman filed a letter of interpretation with respect to wetlands at the site with the DEP in May of this year, May 2022, with the objective of confirming the presence or the absence of wetlands on the site as it related to the work that was being done there. And that application is still pending before the DEP, but it will not interfere with the work that's being subject of the present proposal. What you have in front of you is Whitman's September 21, 2022 soil management and disposal proposal. The cost of the proposal is $1,448,600. That is based upon the 24,000 ton estimate for the fill soils that were deposited, which breaks down to about $45 a ton. And the hotspot soils, the estimate there was about 700 tons. That breaks down to about $60 a ton. And you also have pricing in here of about $280,000 for the excavation itself and some other costs. The backup for the proposal was provided to Ms. Stockton, your municipal engineer, with a breakout of the costing. There's been some other documentation and correspondence with Ms. Stockton and other Mr. Purcell and others on the municipality's staff relating to this. And again, this is all in compliance with the DEP directive. And the DEP, we've gotten several extensions from the DEP to get all of the work done and complete the remediation, and they've been very accommodating in that regard. But at this point, we need to move forward and start with the excavation and removal process. And we've been working very closely with Whitman to make sure that all of the legal requirements relating to this work be observed. We've also been worked with Whitman to get them to come in with a very cost-effective proposal. And what we're doing here with respect to the 24,000 tons is they've qualified for beneficial reuse, which means, excuse me, they don't have to go through the transfer station in the county, and that'll save the municipality, Whitman estimates, about $60 to $70 per ton on transportation and disposal. So the proposal has been looked at for cost effectiveness. It's required, the work has to be done per the DEP directive letter. And I would urge, and others that support this would urge that you pass the resolution so we can move forward. So that's a brief summary and gives you some background relating to this.
Thanks, John. Question, Mia?
How much of this is, if any, is being paid by insurance? Have we figured that out yet?
Well, okay. I mean, here's the situation with respect to the insurance. We looked at that. We worked with the insurance carrier for the municipality in 2020. They then ultimately rejected the borough's application to pay. And one of the principal reason was that there was illegal disposal and dumping of the materials by employees of the municipality at that time, and there's a long background to that. And so they rejected it. So the next step would need to be a lawsuit filed against the insurer. it's a 6-year statute of limitations. At that point, cost had not been incurred yet. We didn't have an idea back in the end of 2020, early 2021, exactly what the out-of-pocket would be for the municipality. I think now that we're looking at $1.4 million plus additional costs, that this might be a good time to revisit that if you'd like us to do that. I mean, we did a preliminary assessment relating to the filing of a lawsuit. I mean, obviously, there's a cost-benefit involved here with respect to cost for counsel versus likelihood of success. If you would like us to do that, at this point, given the expenditure, to prepare make a formal recommendation assessment to the municipality on the insurance, we can certainly do that if you'd like us to move forward with it.
I don't know if this is the proper venue to make that decision, but does seem like something we should proactively explore.
If you have I think you have a legal committee. If you do, I believe I had a preliminary discussion with them about this. If you would like to set up a discussion meeting with them, I'd be very happy to participate, and I and my firm would be happy to make recommendations. It's not entirely clear, given the circumstances here, and you understand that there was some criminal activity that went on. So the question is, was the disposal that was done, and effectively what happened is the people the employees at this site took money to allow dumping that shouldn't have happened there. Does that defeat the coverage, the specific coverage that the municipality had? And that's what the insurance company was pointing to. They actually hired their own outside counsel, and we went back and forth with them, and they ultimately denied the municipality's application for coverage. So if you'd like us to pursue it further, we'd be happy to do it, maybe in the context of meeting with your legal committee or having a separate meeting with with the municipality
I'd
you'd
say
like
at a
us to
minimum with
engage with.
the legal committee and possibly with the closed session. Can I just ask one quick question to Public Works or Engineering, to Deanna? Do we now have the key system at River Road so that employees who are going in and out are identified?
We are still working on it, but they are getting closer and getting that working.
Okay. I mean, I do think that was an isolated incident, but it just seems to be a good thing. It's been in the works for a long time.
Yes.
Okay.
Other council? Okay. Eve and then Michelle.
Yeah, Mia, I have two questions. That was one of them. Remember there were some conversations with Chubb, the insurer. Chubb, may their name live in infamy, for, their refusal to, pay even any of these costs. So I definitely, although I'm not on the legal committee, I would strongly encourage the legal committee to meet with you, John, and to, get some sense of what the cost might be and the likelihood of success. My other question is, having read through this with some care, it seems like this is it. This is like, after this, we are good and there are no, or is this just the down payment and there are many more steps? Like, what is our total? This is already $1.5 million. We've already paid some substantial costs. What comes after this? Are we then free, or are there? If you could talk about that a little bit, I'd appreciate that.
Right. Well, basically, all right. Well, basically, it's not over with this payment. This payment just covers the soil, the excavation, removal, offsite transport, and disposal of the soils. We don't have the results back, the feedback from DEP on the wetlands verification application that was submitted. We'll have to get that. Whitman will have to assess it. There may be some need to do some wetlands restoration work. There's certainly going to be, there was the corrective action plan did reference the need to construct an earthen berm to prevent runoff from these contaminated areas getting into the wetlands areas any further. So there'll be a cost for that. There'll be some additional sampling before this is completed. Now, just to tell you, you have a lot of activities going on out there at 298 River Road. The approach that we took was to respond to the DEP directive specifically, and then this is basically focuses on the removal of the soil and any damage to the primarily to the wetlands areas there, and to address the notice of violation and the administrative order and get that finished. So there will be additional costs going forward, as I've just mentioned, relating to that. There may be now, to the extent that there is any interest in doing any further development or work at the site at large, the 298 River Road site, there may well be some other environmental issues out there that would need to be addressed. One of them, and I'm just to give you a frame of reference, there's a shooting range out there for the police department. Shooting ranges typically, you have lead deposition from the bullets. Many of these ranges have a procedure for reclaiming the spent bullets into the embankment or the backstop embankment. So, you likely have an environmental issue with respect to that, which I think is sitting out there. If you ever wanted to try to sell the property, pull off the public works from there and sell it to an outside party, they'll do an environmental review, and there may be some other issues. So long story short, we're not finished with respect to what the DEP has directed here. There will be some additional costs until we get the results back on the wetlands verification. I'm really not prepared tonight to give you a worst case of the additional cost. We can do that in the not too distant future. Once we have that information, we can ask Whitman to give us, cost to complete for the work that we're talking about right now. So we'd be happy to do it. But definitely we're not finished, but this is the bulk of it, because you're dealing with a substantial amount of soil here, and that's where your cost is. The costs are.
I saw that it's something like 1,250 hours of work. As you said, 24 tons. I think obviously this is work that we have to do. We don't really have an option, but for planning purposes, when we can get those numbers to see what the downside is going to be moving forward, that would be helpful, since as I said, we don't have the choice. We have to allocate the funds for this, so knowing what they are would be helpful. So
well, I'll get that for you. Cost to complete. I'll speak with Whitman about it. We'll see where we are with the wetlands. See if we can get a cost estimate to complete it. And whenever you want to set up a meeting with me and the legal committee, or those of you interested in pursuing the insurance aspect of it further, let me know and we'll do that.
Michelle?
Yeah, no, we absolutely should pursue the insurance aspect. I take it that passing the resolution and moving forward tonight wouldn't jeopardize us in any way in terms of getting an insurance claim. I guess we should pursue that with the legal committee.
Well, the reason, right, and you're raising a very good question. I mean, we had worked through the insurance with the Chubb representatives up until relating to what work was going to be done out there to make sure it had their support, which it did. Here, in this case, because you have a specific direction from DEP, there's very little choice. After they rejected coverage, which I believe was December 2020 or beginning of 2021. We had advised them by correspondence that the municipality was going to need to go forward and address this and undertake this work. And so we reserved the municipality's rights to come back against the insurer at a later point in time. So there's no voluntary work being done here. This is all being mandated by the DEP as administrative agency.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. If not, all in favor, please say aye.
We have to make a motion
I didn't make the
and
motion?
second.
Oh, I did
You
not.
didn't
We
do
let
that.
John
You didn't make
speak first, sorry. Okay. Let's do it this way. Who wants to make the motion? Thank you, Eve. Wow. Is there a second? Michelle, thank you. You have the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. John, thank you very much. Sorry you had to hang out so long for us.
No, that's my pleasure. It's you have a lot of work on your plate these days. So let me know. I'll get you the cost to complete, and let me know about the moving forward on the insurance side.
We will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 22-344, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing the award of a contract to VMG Group via the Mercer County Cooperative Contract Purchasing System for roof replacement at the Hook and Ladder Fire Company, 27 North Harrison Street, and a not-to-exceed amount of $55,000. Is there a motion on that? Thank you, Leticia. Layton's got the second. Questions on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
22-345, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing the award of a contract to VMG Group via the Mercer County Cooperative Contract Purchasing System for the roof and overhang replacement at the Municipal Recreation Building, 380 Witherspoon Street, in a not-to-exceed amount of $41,634.60. Is there a motion? Leticia, thank you. Michelle's got the second. Any questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, 22-346, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing purchase and installation of IP surveillance cameras from Dynamic Security LLC under state contract T2424-717-TEL-00230, not to exceed $18,716.75.
Can we get an explanation of this?
I'm sorry.
Explanation?
Explanation.
Yeah, so a lot of this is simply upgrading what we currently have. A lot of it is in the police department. There's cameras in the Sallyport, other areas of police. I know there's a camera on the ballot box out front that's got to be replaced. So a lot of it is just replacement of what we already have.
In the municipal building and surroundings?
Yes, specifically, I believe it's all at 400.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. Any other, I'm sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
I'll move it. Do we have a motion? Make a motion.
Yeah, I think we did.
Do we?
We didn't again?
No.
God, I got to go home and go to bed. Okay. Is there a motion? I thought we did. Michelle's got it. Anyway, go ahead. Second. Leticia. Phew, rough night. Any other questions or comments? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. 22-347. A resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing change order number 1 and the not-to-exceed amount of $23,976.02, resulting in a revised total contract amount of $146,113.02 for the 2022 tree removal project by, I have no idea how to say that, LLC, doing business as Princeton Tree Care. Is there, Michelle's got the motion. Is there a second? Layton's got the second. Questions on the motion? Eve?
Just a quick comment that we're going to have to budget a lot of money for tree removal in the, going forward with, what's happening with the ashes and everything. It's going to be, we should be prepared for that. So to the Finance Committee and to engineering and our
Actually,
great tree person.
I think Sandy has an ongoing in the 5-year capital projection. She's got ash tree removal every year.
Yep. Okay. Other questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, 22-348, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing the purchase of 3 2023 hybrid police interceptor utility vehicles for the police department under state contract from Chaz S. Winner, Inc., at the total amount of $121,650. Leticia's got the motion. Is there a second? Layton's got the second. Questions, comments on the motion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 22349, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton awarding agreement for communication consulting services to Taft Communications for not to exceed $55,000. Is there a motion on that? Eve's got the motion. Is there a second?
Mark?
Michelle's got the second. Sorry, I see you there. Go ahead.
That's okay. I have a comment.
You go right ahead.
Is that okay?
You have a comment? Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So I just wanted to comment on this. I know it's late, but, you know, we often hear that we don't communicate well with the community. We don't have enough community outreach on various council initiatives. So this is an area that we've worked really hard on for several years. We've improved our social media outreach. We've built a newsletter using Constant Contact. We're also very fortunate in Princeton that we have a lot of media outlets. But still, our email database is limited, and our ability to reach more than just a few thousand households is really limited. So this proposal is to, first of all, do a complete inventory of how we're communicating in the community, and then provide guidance to us on how to better serve the needs of the community with outreach channels. So I just want to say, on behalf of the Communications Committee, myself, and Councilwomen Eve Niedergang and Mia Sachs, and a special thanks to our Administrator Bernie. We have, you know, and also to thank all the companies that participated. So I think, Bernie, you might have a few more comments, but I just wanted to thank everyone for this, this effort.
Yeah, we got 3 responses to the RFP. It was clear that all 3 companies put a lot of time into their responses. A subgroup of 3 of us rated them on a matrix, and the cost went anywhere from $55,000 to $240,000. General time period is 6 to 7 months to complete the work. And at the end of all of that process, it was determined that Taft Communication was the winner or the best out of all of the RFPs submitted. Although I would like to thank them all, because again, it is clear that a considerable amount of time was put in by each of the entities that submitted a proposal.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, next up is the consent agenda. I just want to make sure nobody had any item in the consent agenda they wanted pulled out. If not, someone could move the consent agenda. David, thank you. Mia's got the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, David?
It's 11 o'clock exactly, and I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Eve. All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting's done. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good timing. I was wondering.